man speaking in the city square, trying to tell somebody that he cares. Can you blame the voice of youth for asking what is true? Yeah, the ones that you're calling wild are gonna be the leaders in a little while. When will the lonely voice of youth cry what is true? This our world's waking to a newborn babe, and I solemnly swear it'll be their way. You better help that voice of youth find what is true. And the lonely voice of youth cries, what is true?
Yeah, all right. Welcome, everybody. Man, I love that song. It's just great. Beautiful suggestion by a dear Discord friend we don't see nearly enough. Um, and implementation by somebody who also played down Discord, unfortunately. But I don't care. I got a great song out of it. Welcome, everybody. Yeah, it's been a hell of a week, but we've got our Sam Pal, right? So that's good. And we've got our Muppet Cup. Have you considered? Because might be worth considering. I got some Jordan almonds. I left the pink ones for today. So hard not eating all the Jordan almonds on the day you buy them. But somehow I managed it for you. And we got some tea from the Table Rock Tea Company. And we're just trying to finish off our Westminster, but man, that's good tea. The Westminster's nice, bold. I gotta go up there again and get some more. Some more Westminster for sure. It's been one wild week. It's been absolutely crazy. This week has been completely nuts. So we've got a long intro before we get into the topic at hand. So, like, war's here. Like, that's cool. Everything's way more broken than it was. And more people are noticing. Like, I have more people just now, wow, this is broken. And I'm like, yes, right. But we're still not in the phase where we've come to terms with how long they've been broken, right? Because that's right. And and things are working well enough. So people are like, well, whatever, whatever. And the problem with that is if you don't know when they broke, all your theories about how to fix them are going to be wrong, most likely. So, yeah, you're going to hear more crazy theories. So, yeah. And now we've got unions on strike on the East Coast. Fantastic. But I honestly think that dam will break soon. I mean, people are coming to the realization that unions have a pretty sweet deal and they're overpaid. So there's that. Yeah, over benefited. So then I've heard a lot of talk this week about guy nights. And let me tell you how that's supposed to work. Uh, so very good friend of mine, this is a million years ago, got divorced. It was his second divorce. And they had adopted 2 kids together. And she was also a very good friend of mine. Uh, I knew her longer than I knew him. Uh, so he was, look, I'm worried I'm gonna die fat and alone on my couch. And I was like, no, bro, we can fix that. I still think I can fix everything. So I tried. Um, we got together every Friday. And we'd go out to eat, we'd go see a movie, we'd go, whatever, play board games, whatever. And I dragged a bunch of people in, right? I'm like, hey, we should do this fun thing with us. This is Friday nights, is what we called it. And, like we'd meet up at his house. He had a huge house with a pool and, hot tub and all this stuff. It's quite the palace. And we we were brutal, brutal to one another. And I'd warn people like, yeah, if you come, just, be prepared. Like be really prepared because the talk is not kind and we're all just screwing around, but as screwing around as you can get. So there's a lot of swearing. And we had this little contest, which whoever said the sort of faggiest thing would get the pink sash, um, because pink is not a color for a man. Men don't wear pink shirts. Uh, Salmon, perhaps. Pink, never. So I mean, that's we were brutal, brutal, absolutely brutal, in the way that men need to be every once in a while. Quite honestly, good times, good times, and there were all kinds of contests going on. Like, so he was divorced, and he made quite a lot of money. Uh, I was single, right? I had all the cash in the world back then, and he and I would just go to the very expensive restaurant, the $100 a plate sort of restaurant. And this is back when $100 was a lot of money. Now $100 buys you 4 things at the grocery store. Um, and one day my other buddy who, wife and a kid and, he makes decent money, but also he's got a lot of hobbies and wife and kid and blah. Well, one day he had a bonus. So he comes in like, "No, we're going to this place." And we're like, "What? You're paying?" He's like, "Yeah, we're going to this." And charcuterie board, everyone got apps, meals, and the bill comes and I think he stood up and he grabs his wallet and he just pulls out this wad of money and he's just peeling off slowly and putting it down, because this is his first and only time he was gonna beat us at paying for dinner more than anyone else. Stupid. That's how guys' nights work. That's how they're supposed to work. Like, this is the purpose of them, right? To provide us with healthy competition with other males so that, we see what it gives you the limits of absurdity. And that's actually gonna become important in our talk today. But it gives you the limits of absurdity. It's really important. Like, no, this is dumb. Uh, Look, you'll never get me to admit that that restaurant wasn't worth every dime and dollar we ever spent there. Because my goodness, the food was fantastic, like really good. And the chef sort of knew us, and he'd come out and say hi and ask us how our steaks were and or whatever else we were eating, and how the charcuterie board was and stuff like that. And, if somebody got wine, he'd, well, how's the wine, And eventually, of course, my friend got a girlfriend and he kept insisting that she show up, even though she was like, no, you guys should have your guy thing. But he couldn't help himself. And that was the end of that. Over time, it took a while. So no more board games. We used to play Munchkin quite a lot, the card game Munchkin. That was fun. Sometimes one of his kids would join in. Um, we had it for a while. We had a Pathfinder campaign going. That was fun. Um, various board games, various things we do, or we just go to the movies or something. It all depended. But it was really good. It was really healthy. I forget how long it went on for. At least a year, though. It was quite a while. We had a blast. I actually kind of miss that. I'd love to have guys. I mean, when guys are alone, they're just obnoxious, nasty, dirty, disgusting, over competitive pigs. And it's glorious to wallow in that mud every once in a while. And it's healthy too. Like, it's actually healthy. Um, my attitude, I think probably from the Greek side of my family, my Greek grandfather in particular, my attitude is, oh, you think that's toxic masculinity? I'll show you toxic masculinity. It's like, nah, you don't know nothing. And too bad. Like, if that's a thing in the world, you have to deal with it. I will say Ixnat is completely wrong. He doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's probably insane and should probably be committed to an asylum of some kind immediately. Um, so I see this other phenomena. I didn't mean to write a movie like that, right? So the Joker sequel comes out, and everyone's like, "What the hell is this movie?" And the implication is, you shouldn't have recognized it that way. Also, Did a previous stream on Barbenheimer. It's very good. You should watch that. It's got not just me in it, for example, so it's way better than just me. Um, the woman, Greta Gerwig or whatever her name is, writes Barbie, doesn't realize people are going to identify with Ken, and then gets all upset. And it's like, that's part of the incompetency crisis, right? The competency crisis is real. There's a lot of incompetency. These people have no idea what they're doing. And, to Drinker's point, and a lot of times when Critical Drinker does some of these movie things, he's got other people with him. And a lot of them make the point like, the problem isn't the script or, the implementation or whatever. The problem is who the hell greenlit all this stuff? Like, you guys are putting up cash and you're letting them burn your money this way? Like, you got to have better ways to burn through a few $100 million. But apparently they don't, right? And so that's it's a huge problem, right? Um, that's the sort of the end of the competency crisis when the people who are trying to do things in the world through money, not through their own work, don't see the problem with the workers beneath them, with the people they're investing in and paying money to do things. That's a big problem. Like, because it doesn't matter now whether or not you let the quote creatives run the project because they suck. And there's no pushback from the people above because they suck also. None of them know what they're doing. That's the problem with the competency crisis, is when it extends to that layer of the hierarchy. We're all screwed. That's why we're all screwed. So, and it's interesting too. Another pattern I've been noticing is everyone's simultaneously bragging about how we have less order. We get decentralized currency with Bitcoin, and now we have indie games and everything, and complaining about things that would be fixed by order. So they're actually complaining about a lack of order while saying, "Aha, we finally broke through. We don't, we're not beholden to the government," or whatever nonsense it is this week, right? And yeah, I mean, we cannot trust experts, but half that is rebellion against order. And the other half is the loss of expertise because order is gone. It's a reciprocally narrowing, addictive sort of spiral that we're in. And it's not good. Like, we need to reestablish these concepts and take them more seriously. And I was really happy. So my latest video, the commentary video, on Jonathan Peugeot's talk with Jordan Hall and John Vervaeke, and man, I'm not done yet, but I've done the next two parts. Bangers. Part 3 is a real banger. Yeah, there's some nuggets in there. But I got some great comments on that video too, in particular, which were like, wow, I never realized how dangerous listening to these things is because I missed all this stuff. And one guy was like, yeah, I'm going to put together a practice of listening to videos and then stopping them and taking time to, really absorb what I heard. What a great idea. I've sort of talked about this. I do this sort of automatically, right? When I think I'm getting cognitively overloaded because I have to pay attention to my energy ever since my illness, I stop, right? And I've said this before, like, there's certain videos that I can't watch them in one go. And that's even though I'm not doing anything else often. I'll just like watch them, right? Which is a bigger deal. And believe me, we'll be talking about that in the monologue here coming up. But it's great, just taking the time to integrate, paying attention to how you feel, not just what you heard or saw, right? It's a good practice, right? And look, I learn a lot from doing my YouTube channel, from doing my videos in particular, right? Both in the comments and on my live streams, and thank you all for participating because you enable that, right? It really helps. And we all help each other. And that's sort of the point, right? And I don't want to invoke the dreaded C word in community, but that's part of community. And it's interesting. I don't remember where I heard this. I think it was one of the Tammy Peterson talks with Margarita Mooney Clayton. This is a great frame. Like, we're all told that the things outside of us are material, But the forms are internal, like my truth. You need to find yourself, right? Seek justice within, seek wisdom within. That's wrong. And it's stupid and it's binary and it's all the badness of the world. Don't do that. It's a good frame, right? Like, oh, wow, to see that that's what people are doing. That's look for that frame because you'll see it and then run away, right? Run away, run away from those people. They're stuck. Um, and look, just a quick note, which is related, of course, because of course, um, if you think I said something unrelated, think again. I'll usually let you know. And if I didn't, the odds are it is related. Um, when you do things yourself, right? You know, by yourself or whatever, you're depriving other people of the opportunity to help and in that to learn or to teach you, right? But either way, to commune, right? So this idea is of you being independent or whatever, not good. It's not good, right? It's a terrible, terrible thing that you're doing to everybody else. You're imposing on everybody else by being individualistic. Um, you need to train yourself incrementally, right, to cooperate with others. And every time you do things sort of alone by yourself, you're destroying your ability to cooperate with others to some extent because you're not using it when maybe you could be. And I know that's not all situations. There's a lot of things you have to do on your own or go through on your own. I get that. But also, let's not take it too far because we've been doing that for several decades. And you should notice how that hasn't been done, right? And just kind of look around and you should see it everywhere, unfortunately. And then I wasn't feeling well yesterday. I wasn't feeling particularly well today. Apparently, one of my safe foods is no longer safe. Uh, independently discovered by myself and my friend Sarah because she weirdly is on the road and ate the same damn thing because it's one of the things we eat when we're traveling, just so we don't have to stop and you know risk eating out where bad food abounds. Um, but I wasn't feeling well yesterday, so I was all over the place. I was like, finally, I was like, look, I got the 75-inch TV all to myself. I can watch guy things on it, right? So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna watch the Beekeeper movie because I heard about it from Critical Drinker, and basically he said, look, this is a great movie for, you know, explosions and killing people sort of thing. And I'm like, yes, guy movie, excellent. Um, and then I get into the movie, and the beginning of it's kind of, you know, whatever, clownish, right? It's sort of silly. Um, and it's fine. Like that's what I want. I want a silly movie with lots of explosions. Thank you very much. Like I don't feel well. Like give me the candy. Okay, just give me the damn candy. Um, so I'm watching it. It's like, oh my god, the symbols and the patterns are glorious beyond all imagining. Like I could not have conceived that any movie, much less this particular movie, would go into this. And it's something Critical Drinker I don't think could have ever told me, right? They've got the idea of the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant supremacy because it's set in Boston, which is very funny. Yeah, I just that cracked me up. It's got all the imagery there for that too, which I just like, oh my god, this is so funny. Um, how we're all connected to a hive, right? Uh, removing the head when it becomes rotten, the pattern of a purge, right? The differences between those with money and those without in terms of how they think and how they act in the world and what they do and what they have access to, right? The attention of wealth and power, which is wrong, but when you have quote wealth and quote power, what you attend to um, is different. Now, it's not what's portrayed in the movie because the movie's written by a postmodern binary thinker who's very middle out, right? Um, the seeking for justice that Joseph Campbell, single hero, the superhero type archetype, such garbage nonsense. Um, the lowest being elevated to the highest based on what appears to be merit, but it doesn't even work. She's not, they sort of portray her as really smart or something, but it doesn't even come through in the movie because it's not like it doesn't work. Um, perverse incentive, right, of preserving justice in a rotten system. That's in there too, right? And this is a movie like Man on Fire. It's a do the right thing movie, right? It's like there is a right thing, and we need to do the right thing, right? And so he does the right thing and like wrecks the world in the process. It's just fantastic. Wrecks the bad parts of the world primarily. Um, yeah, there's a lot of who runs the free world, right? Flat world, sort of top down power from above. That's the postmodern power narrative. Very shallow hierarchy, right, in the movie. But we'll get into that soon enough. Um, you have this, corrupted but imperfect functioning system. Don't ruin that. That's actually said in the movie. Um, Bingo, right there, right? Like, indeed, yes. That's very much what we're in the process of doing. An imperfect system, people are pointing it out, therefore we're going to tear it down. No. Now this isn't said right in the movie. This is the funny part. It's got all the right themes. It's great social commentary at some level, but all its solutions are wrong and all the implications are wrong. Every time it tries to do something good, it gets corrupted. Um, and yeah, I mean, somebody bought the election and they used government resources to hunt money to buy the election. It's weird. But the video game framing's there and everything. It's cool. Like I used a piece of software to make a video game out of hunting money. I found a way to hunt the money. I got you the money. And it's like, what? And there's this everybody knows aspects in there, and there's a great line in there. What are you going to do? I'm going to tell the truth. And he's like, tell the truth. What does that even mean? And I'm just like, yes, that's correct. They're using it facetiously, but no, that's exactly correct. And another line, it's not fashionable. I believe there is good in the universe. I'm like, that's awesome. It's so funny. Most of this is at the end of the movie, by the way. So if the beginning's kind of campy and weird and whatever. I mean, I loved every minute of it because I was sick and that's what I wanted. But like as it unfolded, I'm just like get sucked in more and more and more. It probably didn't do any help for me recovery wise because I was so invested in looking at all the patterns and the social commentary as it unfolded. Um, the whole law versus justice theme is in there. You're gonna have to choose between the law and justice. It's like, yes, those are different things. That's great. And the whole thing's like laid bare, right? The big question indeed. I've already pointed this out in previous videos, right? Like law is corrupt. See my video on domicile, losing a home. I'll probably do other videos on that too, because I got more. Uh And another note, not necessarily related to that, but like a lot of TV has given us an objective material reality, an OMR perspective on the world, uh, where the world is mostly perfect, or it was being perfected in the moment. So mistakes were small. Parents would apologize when they did something wrong to you, or the bully would come around and be your best friend, or all this other nonsense. And the problem with exemplifying that, in a medium, especially a terrible medium like a screen, which really is the worst possible. I mean, you want flat world. What do you think a screen is? Why do we have flat world, Mark? Oh, I don't know. TV and movies. Just off the top of my head, that's for sure. It's not even close to the only reason, but also, um, we see this stuff, but what we don't see is how to get along in an imperfect world as imperfect people with other imperfect people. That's what we haven't seen exemplified on TV much. I'm not saying it's not there. I'm saying, boy, you know, I think that's why people like Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is very much about mistakes, errors, imperfections in the world, imperfections in people you're with, and how that interrelation and even in imperfection and what could be considered a mistake, you get this a mistake that worked out well. We'll say you get this interaction where in the moment of greatest triumph, evil mysteriously manifests unexpectedly, and as the evil sort of takes over, the other evil prevents evil from manifesting and then falls into the lava. It's really subtle, actually, Lord of the Rings, but it's right there, and it's great. It's like two wrongs make a right, almost. It's very interesting. So let's jump into this idea of incremental improvement and what it means to make sort of progress in that way. And I think the problem is it's really tempting to say, look, this is easy, right? But it isn't. And the reason why it isn't is because it's postmodern ethos. People have abandoned sort of the core concepts, and now they're missing those core concepts. And so they can't really fit incremental improvement into their worldview anymore, into the way of conceiving of the universe, because these core concepts are missing, right? There's some framing that most people don't have anymore that is sort of required. And you know that the world doesn't pop out of nothing. There is a frame, there is an ultimate frame even, and there are other frames that are important. And if you implement something and it doesn't work, maybe your implementation is fine and your frame was bad. And people don't realize that. Well, how would you know? Well, one of the ways you know is that your process was good. Well, what is a process? Well, part of a process is incremental. A process is a type of incrementalism. I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole because it's not going to help us understand incremental improvement if we jump too far. But just keep that like in the back of your head. So, without sort of pointing any more to frames and framing, um, incremental trains you to be bored properly. So doing incremental things trains you to manage boredom, and it trains you to be on time. It trains your sense of time. It trains your consistency with time. It trains you to stick to a schedule, to arrive on time, to leave on time, not before, right? Um, you can't be busy all the time because you'll burn yourself out. So being bored is important, right? And doing something sort of rote or boring or however you want to say it uh, often leaves you available and puts you in a situation where you're not busy. And not being busy all the time is a value, right? Unless of course you're not valuable, right? So think carefully about that. Availability is huge to people. And if you if you cannot add value on a moment's notice when asked, what is your value exactly? Well, it's not as much as you think. That's for sure. Factory workers, at least, you know what they are worth and why. You can quantify the job very easily, right? And their value cannot be replaced. And this is where people get confused, right? It's not to say someone else can't do their job, but someone has to be able to do that job, and not everyone can. If you can't be bored, you're screwed. You'll never work in a factory. You have no value to a factory ever, but factories are the things that run the world. And interestingly, that's often why we have bad factory workers promoted, right? Because, well, if you're bad at the factory, maybe you're good at managing the factory. That's possible, right? And then the good ones never want to move up because they're comfortable where they are and this is what they're good at. Why shouldn't you stay doing what you're good at? It's a good question. And companies aren't all about moving people up for a reason. It's not necessarily the reason you think. Don't be a Muppet. But you're going to be a Muppet anyway. And I think people get that really confused. Like they don't understand. Well, why this person's been there 10 years? Why aren't they in management? Or maybe they don't want to be in management. Man, I met a lot of factory workers who, well, factory workers tend to hate managers, just a natural sort of disdain. And when somebody used to work in the factory and now they move up in the hierarchy, they're hated typically for that. No matter how loved they were for being on the floor. Not universally, but like as a general rule, that happens. And because there's a high value in someone being there on time, being there every day, and having a certain attitude, at least outwardly, like a little hint, no one cares about your internal emotions. No one cares. Like piss off. Oh, I'm upset. So I'm going to make everybody else miserable. No, go to hell. Stop it. Like be better. Right? People want that. They want that certainty, that consistency. And you need to train your ability to do that because you need to be able to do that. So let me tell you a story of, well, lots of things actually. Um, you're going along, trying to learn something, and then one day, you're sort of good at it. So let's kind of get specific on that. So when I was very young, probably 8, something like that, um, I had computers and I wanted to learn computers. And, learning computers means a lot of different things, as it turns out, especially back then. And so I was learning BASIC. Now, the BASIC programming language, BASIC stands for Beginner's All Purpose Symbolic Instruction Code. Thank you very much. It's an acronym. And I think it was developed in the 1950s. I think it was McCarthy is the guy. But, you know, you go about your day, maybe you come home from school or whatever, and the first thing you do, fire up the computer and start playing with BASIC. And you do that every day because that's part of a routine, right? Or a liturgy, if you want to think of it that way, right? It's part of a routine that you do, a procedure that you're executing, right? Get up, put your clothes on, get some breakfast, uh, hit the school bus or walk. I walk to school. Walk to school, and then do the school thing. Come home, and now you're gonna once again engage with your computer, right? You're gonna once again learn some basic, and so you try that, and over time, the next thing you know, you're creating more and more interesting programs in BASIC that do more and more interesting things. Now, BASIC's a nice programming language to learn first. Um, so is Logo, by the way, or Turtle Graphics, as it used to be called, which is a subset of Logo. Um, because most of the heavy lifting is done for you. Now, one of the things you'll notice is a limit to what you can do in BASIC, and it's very hard to do things outside of those limits, those constraints. And that's on purpose, obviously, but also very powerful language to build all kinds of business logic in very easily for pretty much anybody. And you learn variables and recursion, very important stuff. You learn how to manage loops and how to do switch case statements and all kinds of interesting things that you know concepts that exist in other languages where those concepts become more powerful because they're not limited by the language. And the thing is, you do it every day, right? You play every day with that thing, right? Or you could be anything, right? You play baseball every day, and then all of a sudden you're better. You don't know what the hell happened. What happened there? You don't know. You're a muppet. But it happened. That's incremental improvement. Because you put in the time and effort, you improve, right? And it's so slow, you don't notice. What you notice is it just becomes part of what you do. And a lot of musical instruments are like this, right? You play a musical instrument, you play every day. Maybe you sort of up the game and start playing more sophisticated stuff, right? Or you learn a new chord or whatever it is, right? You learn a new trick on how to hold your hands. It doesn't even matter, right? And then, you just do the thing, and other people probably know how good you are before you do. Because for you, you're just one step above where you were yesterday. Or maybe none. Maybe you go back a little ways because that happens, right? And then somebody wants a song played right now. Well, You were busy incrementally improving, but you weren't like in the middle of composing a symphony. So you're available now. That's valuable, as I just went over, right? You're available to play a song. And your availability to play a song goes up the more you practice. And it's more songs that you can play. So two things, well, more than two, are happening at once. That's re-enchantment, right? That's the expanding, the reciprocally opening of the world right there. So incremental improvement is what allows for that. So it's worth talking about, what increments are, right? And increments are the things that we use to build things, right? They are formed by your participation. They aren't emergence. Emergence happens, like irrespective of or independent of you. Emergence happens. That's why emergence is not necessarily good. Emergence can be used for good, but you need to participate incrementally in emergence, in chaos, in order to build from it. That's part of incremental improvement too. These increments are elements and motions that are forming the world. And the fact that they're small doesn't really mean anything. And what is incremental improvement for? I'm going to get a little controversial here, perhaps, but I'm going to say incremental improvement is for the normies. You. Sorry, Muppet, you're a normie. How do I know? No one who thinks my channel is at all interesting is not a normie in the following sense. You don't see the depth of hierarchy and therefore are limited in seeing patterns in the world. You don't see the depth of hierarchy. You see hierarchy. There's something above me and something below me. That's not the depth of hierarchy. That's a flat vision. All right. And because of that, you're limited in seeing patterns. Like people who are not limited in seeing patterns are not going to come and watch my channel because they're going to be like, duh, what's this guy talking? Like, why would anybody need to say this? And maybe the more introspective ones will go like, wow, this guy's saying really important stuff. But by and large, you need incremental improvement. I need an incremental improvement, right? Like we all need it. We should all still practice it for other reasons, which I'll get into. Um, but look, some people are born with skills. That's almost no one, by the way, as it turns out. And the rest of people have to learn skills through rote, boring, banal, incremental improvement. And most skills that you have can be improved by incremental improvement. Just doing the damn work on a freaking schedule. And that's the thing. That's the thing. And we have to be better one step at a time, one tiny step. We need to look at this so we know when we're at our top, because your top in programming and my top in programming are different because we're not the same people. Not the top. You won't get to the top ever. That's not going to happen. There's always more anyway. But you need to know when you're at your limit, when that incremental improvement doesn't work anymore. And that's hard to spot. But we'll cover more of that later. And the thing is, ironically, linearity destroys the ability to measure things like progress, right? Or how well you get towards your goals. Like it can't, linearity destroys that because we don't make linear jumps through incremental improvement. We make some linear jumps through incremental improvement. It's a linear progression in some sense, but that's not how it unfolds in the implementation. It's not how the world is. There are things in the world that seem that way for a while, right? At a certain scale, by the way. That's how you know scale. Linearity rules in scale. Once you lose linearity, you've changed scales. So now the rules are slightly different. I've been over that before. And the thing is, the immediate payoff isn't what you're looking for. The immediate payoff isn't the thing. And training yourself by doing this incremental improvement helps you understand that. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this every day at 2 o'clock. I'm going to spend an hour writing, or maybe 4 days a week, or whatever it is. Doesn't matter. Having the schedule, setting up to do a little bit more than last time on your schedule is super important. And it teaches you that payoffs happen over time, because we think there's an immediate payoff. Oh, if I invent a new type of electric car, I'll be Elon Musk overnight. That's a flattening of time. That's never going to happen. Nothing like that has ever happened or can ever happen. And when you're doing this incremental improvement, it gives you an opportunity to pay attention to the future. There are future opportunities that you need to set up for now. And doing incremental improvements helps you with that. It helps you with looking forward. This incremental improvement sharpens your skills of connecting what you do now to the future. So not just looking towards it, right? Like, oh, I'm going to be a great game programmer, so I'm going to, learn Unreal Engine. I'm going to learn these programming languages, and but you need to learn to connect things together, right? What's the story, right? Not just seeing those things in the future, but actually connecting them together to form a story. That's why story is so important. Everybody knows story is important. Everyone's talking about how the importance of story. Nobody even has a good definition of story that I can find, except me, of course. See, story, narrative, archetype. Great video. Great video. Even Paul Vanderklay liked it, although he still doesn't like my channel, even though he watches it. So that might be a hint of what's wrong over there. This incremental improvement trains consistency, right? And just as a note, stubbornness and consistency are exactly the same thing with a slightly different valence, right? Or a slightly different implication, or slightly different assumption. Oh, they're just being stubborn. No, they're being consistent. And consistency is important, right? But you can't be only ever consistent. Yeah, discernment. See my videos on discernment. But consistency is important to build things and or maintain them. It's part of the importance of the world. It's part of how we manifest meaning. If you don't have incremental improvement and practices around incrementally improving, you're going to have a meaning problem of some kind, maybe not the meaning crisis. I don't know. But learning to build things up over time at a quality and change that quality slightly over time, that's the quality of the relationship. That's the intimacy. That's where it is. And the intimacy allows you to manifest meaning, or we'll say proper meaning. And doing things over and over again over time builds competency. See last week's live stream. You want to see building competency? Watch my first video and my latest video. Or my first live stream and this live stream. How do you build muscle at the gym? Incremental improvement. How do you learn to code? Incremental improvement. How do you learn to read? Incremental improvement. How do you learn your alphabet? Incremental improvement. How do you learn math? All of it. Everything. All the time. If you try to learn it without that, you just didn't learn it, but you think you did. You psyoped yourself. And we're doing that en masse. And other people are telling you, to be fair, that you can do that when it's clearly not true. And this idea of doing these sort of boring things, this rote over and over again sort of stuff, where you're stuck in a rut or whatever, it clears your brain of clutter. When you do things over and over again, it unburdens you. It reduces the amount of energy you're spending. The world is busy. And how do you contrast busy and not busy? How do you know when you're rested? How do you know when you're relaxed? How do you know when you're on vacation? There are people that don't know those things, and they've said it publicly. I've seen them. And I feel bad for them, but it's because they never do these simple things as starting points and improve over time. Maybe they did, but now they don't. And so they've lost that sense for what rest is. It's gone for them. They can't understand what being on vacation means, what being without a phone is, right? They're totally cognitively overloaded. And guess what else? When you learn small parts first, you can learn to put things together properly later. And when things are put together improperly, you'll notice. That's why incremental improvement is important, because it teaches you getting better versus getting worse. If you learn to code by building an application, you don't know how to put things together. You know how you built something with unity or oneness. Neoplatonism is evil. Without understanding all its parts. Neoplatonists never talk about parts. They say the one and the many. They never talk about the many. They're always like, ooh, the one is abstract, the many is abstract. No, it's not. It's discernible and it's easy. And everybody saying that is lying to you. So, exercising your memory of bad habits so that you don't attend to them is a form of refinement that is enabled by this incremental improvement. You're doing the boring thing over and over again, incrementally, but it allows you to clear your thoughts and clear your mind. The relationship between effort and progress is not what you think. Progress can be had with less effort and more time with incremental improvement, which is less cognitively taxing. And why don't we have wisdom? Well, part of wisdom is putting work into the right things at the right time. If you knit outside at night in the dark, it won't be as quick and the quality won't be as good as if you do it under light. Where you knit and when you knit matters. That's true for everything. I used to have this whole system set up back before I got sick where there were certain hours I could code and there were certain hours I couldn't. Certain hours I would sit down to read and there were certain hours where I would watch TV. And why? Because you run on a cycle, on a daily cycle. You've got the circadian rhythms, you've got the glucose cycle, you've got the hormonal cycles, you've got all kinds of cycles in your body. And you can't necessarily calculate them, and you don't have to. It's ridiculous, right? You can use introspection to figure out what's good for what. When's it best for you to read? Probably not the same time of day when it was best for me to read. You can get a sense for these things. You have to put the work in, but that seems to be the problem. Nobody wants to put the work in because everything else is too easy too. And we live in a world where incremental improvement is bad, and the training of it is being done away with by automation, by technology. And this idea is a focus on goals over journeys, on end results, over training things like focus. You're scatterbrained, you're anxious, you have ADHD allegedly, or whatever nonsense psychological garbage, evil designation you've gotten. Yeah, guess what? It's because you're not doing incremental improvement. That's what trains focus, helps with contemplation, helps with meditation, which, unlike prayer, is internal, right? And it helps with integration, learning what it is you just experienced. Like the commenters on my commentary video. Oh, I didn't realize this is what I was hearing and reacting to when I was watching this video. Yeah, you didn't integrate it. And if you're not integrating things, everything sounds good. Emergence is good, baby. Novelty all the way down, bro. Nostalgia is bad. We'd have to think about things. Things were integrated back then. We'd have to integrate ourselves with the past. Screw nostalgia. See that pattern anywhere? I do. And doing these things like contemplation, meditation, and integration and reflection, it takes time. And your relationship to time is healthier if you do incremental, slow engagement that allows for reflection and integration and learning and improvement. Now, incremental improvement is not a solution. Even if you hit the top, it'll be nothing compared to the top 1% because you're not in the top 1%, probably about anything. Sorry, you're just not. It's okay though. It's not a big deal. Just calm down, get over it. It'll be fine, right? If everybody's in the top 1%, the world can't operate. And the world's operating, so everyone's not in the top 1%. It's fine. Just relax. You're normal, not normative. Normative is evil. Don't listen to people that use words like that. They're not good people. And they're not going to be good people because they've corrupted themselves in some fundamental fashion. You're just in like the 99% or maybe the 90% of the population. There's nothing wrong with that. And maybe you're top 1% in something. I doubt it though, right? Because odds are you aren't, right? And worse, it's irrelevant because that's not what moves the world. The smartest guy with the best idea in the world can't make it happen. He needs workers for that. People who will get up every day and be bored. But they're not bored. But they're bored from your perspective because you're a muppet and you don't understand how the world works. And look, you're not special in that way. Get over it. Sorry you were lied to and that you lied to yourself and you continue to lie to yourself. But also, that's not you. It's okay. It shouldn't be. It doesn't have to be. The world, it takes all types to make a world. We need you to be better in what you're good at, whether you're appreciative of that or not, by the way. That's the sacrifice no one wants to make. And that's why people who are contented and happy doing what they do are people that we're baffled by and like, oh, wow, look at that. Because it seems novel. It used to be the norm, by the way, just to let you know. Look, it'll be fine. You're not in the top 1%, not in the top 10%. Just chill out, integrate, deal with reality for a while. It's cool. And again, everyone needs incremental improvement, even the top 1% or the top 1%. At least for something, right? Like incremental improvement somewhere in your life. I mean, if you're a naturally gifted musician or whatever, maybe you don't need to play the piano every day, but maybe it would make you better if you did. I don't know. And we don't get anything without doing a little bit at a time, small steps, not always linear either. I worked at a place once a while back. They had a ping pong table at work. Uh, and my boss talked about this phenomena they quote just discovered. It was something I already knew and fairly sure had been published before, but whatever. We're constantly rediscovering things that everybody already knew. Yay, science. He said, well, when they've measured, you're learning a skill, right? And he was likening it to ping pong. And he said, look, I just got worse. And what that usually means is that I will get better because you're reorganizing. You've hit the top of something. You're reorganizing the way you play. And then you're going to come back with new tactics and techniques, right? So you're going along, you hit the top of something, your skills or whatever, right? And then that usually means your base assumption is not optimal. Your frame is wrong. Incremental improvement helps you find the limits of your framing, your bad framing. So doing things over and over again and getting the same result means you're an idiot. You need to go back to first principles or further back, closer to first principles and stop trying to make progress. And when you do that, you get better. And that's the thing. People don't realize that. It's not linear improvement. But incrementally improving involves sliding back sometimes to fix the frame, to improve your assumptions, to break out of a bad habit that you created through your incremental improvement. That's not a thing to be solved. It's the way the universe is supposed to function, and it's good. So don't fix that. It's not a problem. Right? It's important to make mistakes in your incremental improvement so that you realize what mistakes look like, so that you can spot them when you're not making them. And this is absolutely the number of times I just point at something and say, you see that change? That change is going to break everything. And people are like, wow, how do you know that? And I'm like, what are you effing kidding me? How do you not know that? It's clear as day that you can't do that. That combination isn't going to work. They don't know what I'm talking about. And I cannot explain it to them. And you can use logic, reason, rationality all day long in this scenario, and it works. They'd reject it because we're not logical, rational, reasonable creatures. Sorry, guys. Like all the research says this, by the way. I'm not making this up. This has been known about forever in the psychological research, in the neurological research, it's all right there. We're almost never rational ever. We can be rational for very short periods of time at the cost, a great cost of energy, great cost. And it's worthless because you have a bad frame. All the logic, reason, rationality in the world is just going to support your framing, your pre-existing framing. That's what it's there for. It's to validate your frame and make your frame consistent. It doesn't mean that you have a correct frame. There's lots of framing, and you can object to this all day long. I get it. There's lots of framing where committing genocide is the right answer. And that's backed up by science. Science is evil sometimes, by the way, because it can be used for evil, but that's backed up by science. Right? If you knew what the master race was, then eliminating all the other races would very efficiently get you to a better world. That's probably actually true. The fact that you can't figure out what better is for the world, because maybe there's not just one better world. Oops. And the fact you can't figure out what, quote, master race would bring about that world doesn't mean it's illogical, irrational, or unreasonable. Quite the contrary, my friend. Logic, reason, and rationality don't tell you when your starting axioms are wrong. They're not supposed to. They're supposed to proceed from them, not question them, because they can't by definition. They have just hard limits on these things. Science doesn't know its own limits. Science doesn't know the limits of logic, reason, and rationality anymore. It used to. Go back 100 years, clear as day. God doesn't play dice with the universe, huh, Einstein? I agree. What a weird thing for a physicist to say. Unless it's not. Oops. And the thing is, novelty distracts us from incremental progress. It hijacks our attention towards other goals. Doing the incremental improvement is all about proceeding towards a goal over a long period of time and getting very little or negative satisfaction out of it in the short term, and training that, which is the same as training focus, and it's the same as training your ability to stick to something, right? Your stubbornness, your ability to persevere, your strength overall. It teaches you what strength itself is. Your telos matters. It teaches you to stay on your telos. And we need rest. We need relaxation. And we need entertainment. We need those things. Right? But too much is not good, and telos matters. If you're not entertaining yourself because you feel sick and you want to feel better, maybe you shouldn't be entertaining yourself. Maybe you should be working on something. Existing project, finishing off something, or maybe incremental improvement where you can rest right? And that's why you don't want to incrementally improve while listening to videos, because what you're doing is you're filling up your cognition. You're trying to incrementally improve and you're distracting yourself at the same time because you're, quote, bored, whatever the hell that means. You won't learn through your incremental improvement. You'll do the thing, but you'll do it exactly the way your muscle memory tells you, and you won't change it and adjust it, and you won't get better. And now it is a waste of time all of a sudden, all because you've tried to efficiently allocate your time. And I've said this before, I generally don't do that. When I listen to a video, I generally sit down and I'm prepared to take notes. It's not to say I never do other things, but I generally avoid doing other things. And when there are other things, they're usually temporary things that pop up. And sometimes I have to pause the damn video and go attend to something seriously, like write an email. I almost never write an email while a video is running. Very bad idea. Because you'll miss the psyop being done on you in the video because you're distracted, your attention split. And maybe you can multitask, but there's a cost for that. You better be very careful what you're multitasking, if indeed you believe you can do that. But novelty hides our incremental improvement because we long for it, that hit, that excitement. Uh, we seek excitement and incremental improvement, but it's not there. Not the same type anyway, right? It's way at the end. It's days, weeks, months, years away till we can play the piano on command with 300 or 400 songs at our disposal without reading sheet music. And shiny and loud is not better, but it's usually worse. So that's good to know. And that's the emergence is good. Ooh, it's shiny, it's loud, it's exciting. Makes me feel good. Yeah, just because you feel good doesn't mean it is good. I mean, I hear heroin's quite a trip, but it ain't good. Same for cocaine, for that matter. And engaging in conversations with people you think are smarter than you, which they may not be, it sucks away your incremental improvement because you're trying to understand something that's further from you than you know. You don't know what's in between you and understanding Andrew Huberman or even John Vervaeke. Like, you have no idea. And that gets tied up with cognitive overload. Doing rote things over and over again frees up your brain, trains your anxiety, and makes you better. If you flood your brain while doing that, especially with something that's really high above you, you get used to this go, 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 go. You're going to be anxious. You're going to seem to have ADHD. It's going to be a problem for you. I don't recommend it. You don't know what steps you need. And when somebody jumps you ahead by telling you, oh, here's how entropy works. Yeah, maybe you need to learn that slowly over time so that you actually understand and integrate the concept. And look, you learn muscle memory through incremental improvement, right? Which reduces your cognitive load. It frees up your brain, but it also gives you rest. You listen to a podcast, you didn't learn. You don't grow. Your cognitive capacity is now limited. You're tiring yourself out without even realizing. People don't understand. The organ that burns the most energy in your body is your brain. Doing boring things rests your brain, but you're still doing things. You're still making progress. That's actually way more efficient than also overloading your brain. And again, you can't learn through incremental improvement while you're flooding your brain with other things. So there's two aspects: learning because there's capacity there, and relaxation because you've left capacity. This idea that you need to use up all of your capacity for efficiency's sake is a nonsense psyop that you shouldn't buy into. So be careful. I know I haven't done a good uh, cognitive capacity video yet, but I'm working on it. I promise. Someday I'll figure out how to do it. Getting quite wrapped up with these commentary videos with, oh, you want cognitive overload. Try listening to Peugeot and Vervaeke and Jordan Hall talk for the first time and do a commentary on it all at once. That just wipes me out, man. I'm like, at the end of that, I'm just tired. Like, yeah, I got to do something that doesn't require me to think at all. Usually I'll go watch Adrian's Digital Basement or something goofy, so I don't have to think. I can just watch some bumbling fool screw up basic troubleshooting operations or talk about computers that he's allegedly had experience with, but actually really doesn't know anything about. Uh, so I actually like him, but I'm often like, "What? What are you doing? No, why? No, that's not how that works." He's got a lot of stuff right, and most of his stuff is right. I notice details and I nitpick because that's what I do. Bruce, imagine being discontented and complaining about it on the internet on this way video. Yeah. Oh my, what a lot of burden this person must be bearing. Indeed. Bruce again. Well, because it seems that many people are so concerned with being, yeah, the 1%, right? That they carve out a novel niche, right, to be king of their own kingdom, right? Which population? Them, right? Or population one. Yeah, if your goal is to be in the top 1%, you can do that really easily by being alone. Intimacy crisis, anyone? Where do people think this stuff comes from? Like, seriously, like, that's exactly where it comes from. You're trying to be an individual. There's lots of reasons why you might try to be an individual. And yeah, you separate yourself from the world like an idiot. And then you wonder why you feel alone. It's like, well, you made yourself alone because you wanted to be at the top of something instead of cooperating with something bigger than you. And it's a trade-off, like, you gotta pick one. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's super important. But, if anybody wants to join, I've posted the link. Oh, yeah, I gotta pin it, right? Let me pin it on my channel since I actually have the infinite power to do so. Look at that. I pinned it on navigating patterns. Feel free to hop in. Interesting, something in StreamYard is broken, I think, or I set up the stream wrong, but oh well. I'll find out later. Yeah, it just thanks to Tom, by the way. I got to talk to Tom today, which was nice. For the topic idea, I have no idea why I didn't see this as the logical next topic in the live streams, but that's why I have other people. Uh, yeah, it's one person watching, talking directly to the head and manipulating the flow of how this all works. So thank you, Tom. Um, And that's through discernment, right? Like, I don't listen to every suggestion. Obviously, some people make really bad suggestions or they make suggestions without understanding how this all works because they don't see the patterns. So they haven't done the incremental improvement to understand patterns as such and notice how to use them correctly. And that's lots of people. Lots of people struggle with that. But it's important to keep in mind that doing that sort of rote, redundant, boring work is super important. It does so much for you and you really don't appreciate it. And almost everybody when they were a kid, that's what they did. Like, that's how you come into adulthood. And children want and need that structure. And we've done away with it and given them TV babysitters instead, or video game babysitters, worse yet. And it feels good. And it frees us up as parents to be individuals again. Also, individualism is fundamentally evil, just to let you know. So I'm still a no on all of that. Um, a lot of people continue to defend it, and it's always very funny because they all lose. Which I like to win, so I'm okay with it. Also, they're wrong, so they should know that. I think it's important that you know when you're wrong. They don't like it, but I don't really care. Uh, I don't care if they like it. Adam Jeffrey Jr. What if you legit don't know what you're good at? You're not good at anything. That's why you need incremental improvement. You just start doing things and seeing how they go. And it takes a long time to unfold. And then eventually you get to a point where you're either topped out, right? Or you're at a point where you know you can improve and you know you can get even better, right? Yeah. I mean, you're not good at anything by default. Like you were a baby, you didn't even know how to walk. You weren't good at walking. How did that happen? Incremental improvement. That's how it happened. Mimicry, right? That's the other thing. I meant to cover that. Incremental improvement is all about mimicry, man. That's what it's all about. It's about that Girardian idea of mimicry. You're mimicking things, engaging with them over and over again, watching other people do them, and then you're trying to mimic them. And that's incremental improvement. That's what it's all about. But let's hear what Bruce has to say. Welcome, Bruce. Good to see you, my friend.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going all right. It's going all right. I think I'm just adjusting to being back as a bachelor for a couple of weeks. I'm like, what's going on? It was
Yeah,
almost a catastrophe eating before the stream because I'm like, wait a minute, I have to do all this stuff first? The food isn't like on the table, ready to go? What's happening?
yeah, my wife and kids are out of town this evening as well, so
Oh
I'm doing
no.
the same.
There you go. There you go.
I just spend my time working more is really what happens. No
Not me.
obligations, more work. You know?
Not me. I spent my time going, where is the world? What happened to my world? I had
Yeah.
such a nice world. It was noisy in here and now it's super quiet. What's going on? And
It's an odd thing. It is quiet when you're alone.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's great. Incremental improvement's an important topic. It's an
Yeah,
odd
it's how you get competency, right?
Yeah, it's an
The
odd
last week's
thing.
topic.
It's a strange thing because I feel like sort of folk modern wisdom is a sort of they kind of speak that, whereas it's sort of like take all the wins or do one thing at a time or don't bite off
Mhm.
more than you can chew. But that doesn't seem to be in practice really, or in
Right.
or attached to any ultimate, goal, telos, or meaning, or however you want to say it. Right?
Right.
It's like
Right.
it's so relative, and so when
Mhm.
you're like making up the progress yourself, and so you're like
Yeah.
whatever you feel is progression, and oh, I'm gonna incrementally progress upon that road. Well,
Right.
it almost is like an ever changing target if you don't have a North Star,
Exactly.
and so there's just a relative. So what are you improving toward? Really nothing,
Right.
you
Right.
know.
It's not like one way greed happens to people who aren't greedy is they become focused on the money and they become focused on getting more money instead of becoming focused on whatever it is they were passionate about to begin with. Or they
Mm.
start with money as a goal. That's even worse. Like that's the death of the universe right there. Right.
Yeah, that is one, I guess, North Star they could make, like the material.
Mhm.
But that's funny, right? Because money isn't fixed. Not in our
Right.
world,
Right. Right.
right? $100 today isn't $100 in 10 years necessarily.
Right.
So it's a never-ending thing. And as
Right.
far as the person that said, "What if you don't know what you're good at?" Well,
Mhm.
it's like nobody knows what they're good at.
Yeah. Exactly.
Do something.
Yeah. You got to start. You got to incrementally find out what you are good at and what you are not good at.
Yeah, so long as you're aiming at the good. Now, don't start like I would encourage people to start getting good at Wicca or something, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's tough when you start saying do something. So in that sense, you need a foundational moral standard somewhere. But then just start. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. And then the only way you can find out if you're good at something is by trying to do it over and over again.
Yeah,
Not
you
once.
also need feedback from like people in your community,
Your
accountability.
mentors.
Yeah, it's hard, there's it's well, especially like as men in some sense, there's a sense in which you do the thing and you don't want to talk about doing the thing because if you talk about you're doing the thing, then people are like, well, don't talk about it, just do it. But if you never tell people that or ask for accountability to some degree, then how do they know? How can you rely upon them for help? And so, to some degree,
Right.
you have to talk about goals or ask for accountability to some degree.
Right.
Um, and
Well,
that I
people will
think is
hate you
big.
for that.
Yeah,
People will hate you for having a goal. People will hate you for being able to articulate your goal. And people will hate you for going after a goal, especially if they're not. But that's a good way to know who to get rid of in your life. And that sucks. That sucks, man. Like, I don't know. I mean, this couldn't happen probably, but like if if somehow it was the case that I couldn't talk to you anymore, Bruce, like that would suck. I would be
right.
really unhappy and hurt by that for sure.
Mhm.
But if you became toxic for some, like I said, that sound possible. And let's hope, God willing, that it's not. I'd have to do that. And
Yeah.
I've met people who have had to go through getting rid of all their friends. I've never had to do that, thank goodness. But I've met people who had to actually have no friends for like a week or two until they found better people because all the people
Yeah.
around them were drug addicts,
Yeah.
and then they couldn't stay away from the drugs, right? Because
Yeah.
all your friends are drug addicts. It's going to be a problem. Like even indirectly, like even if you
Right.
never do the drugs, the results of being around drug addicts are real, man. Even when they're not high.
Sure.
Sometimes people come looking for those guys, and they don't care who they hurt.
It's tough
You
too.
know?
That also sometimes sorts itself out. If you start doing things that aren't
If you
involving
let
those
it.
people.
Oh,
You
I
know.
forgot to mention this. If you let it. So what did I watch last night? I watched one of my favorite movies that I've talked about before, Rounders.
Oh, good movie.
Everyone's telling him, get rid of this loser. He's going to drag you down. And what does the loser do? He drags him down. And he's like, no, man, he was my friend. He's my ride or die. He did one thing for me once so I didn't
Right.
get in trouble. And now I owe him.
Rounders. It was Ed Norton was the bad guy, right? Or the
I think so, yeah.
Ed Norton was the guy that kept dragging him down, and Matt
Yeah,
Damon was
Worm.
trying to do the right thing.
And his name
Or
is Worm. I'm like, it's
yeah,
so
right.
great.
Worm. It's great. Yeah, it's good. Yeah,
Great movie.
Even the wicked Russian mob guys, like, well, credit where credit's due. Like,
Oh, right. The very end of the movie. He's like, no. I'm all upset. He won fair and square, Pam.
Right.
He didn't have to. He had the
Yep.
muscle. He was
Right.
in a cage, literally in a cage with this guy.
Mhm.
Literally behind a locked door. Anything could have happened.
Yep.
And the guy he's not a bad guy, right? Ultimately, he's a Russian mobster who's honest and honorable and says, no,
Right.
the guy won fair and square. I mean, he was mad. He's throwing stuff, and his guys were like, rah, we're just going to take the chips back. And
Right.
ultimately, they didn't do it.
Yep.
Because he said, no. He won. Let
Because
him
he
win.
understands that that's the rules.
That's the
Those
rules.
are the
Right.
rules.
There's an
Even
order
if
to the
they best
world.
you. Yeah.
Right.
Because if he were, let's just say he were to flip the script and just beat the guy up and take everything, well, then what sort of respect does he garner then later from all the people around him who are doing what's right by him, by the
Yeah.
rules? Because now the rules don't apply. So, you'll lose all your allegiance.
Yeah.
It's a good movie.
It's a great movie. I
Yeah.
love that movie.
Yeah.
It's nice and simple, too. There's nothing difficult about the film.
Yeah, that's true. That is the one thing I think after thinking about, because I watched it again not that long ago, and I was like, I thought there was another twist to this, but no, that was it. There
No.
was, yeah,
No. Yeah, no. There's no twists in the movie, really. It's a very
Right.
straightforward film. It
yeah,
just tells a very easy, straightforward story that you need to engage with. It's free on Pluto TV, by the way. Everyone can get Pluto TV for free. So it's on demand, free on demand. Yeah, I didn't even until I bought this new TV, I didn't know there was free on demand on multiple services, but apparently there is.
yeah.
Not
It's usually an ad supported thing, or the hopes that you'll continue and buy something else. Something
Ad
like
supported.
Rounders is making no more money anyway. So
Yeah, but I think actually with Pluto, I'm fairly sure the ads. 8 minutes of ads or something ridiculous at the beginning, and then the movie's uninterrupted. And I was like, deal. We're
Yeah, I can take that.
handshake. It's an honor
Yeah.
to you, sir. I'm like, I'm
Fair
fine
enough.
with that.
Yeah, I'll take 8 minutes of ads at the front.
Yeah.
Yeah, turn it on, go get some popcorn, whatever. I don't care.
Yeah, there's services like that. So yeah, it's not bad at all.
I appreciate that.
And yeah, and that's another, that's a movie of incremental improvement. Like he keeps getting these little lessons and little lessons and little lessons, and at the end, it's all built up. It's a very negative increment.
Yeah.
It's all built up. At the end, he's like, "Wait a minute, we owe how much money? How do I owe this money? Like, how did that happen?" Right? Because he's not doing anything wrong. He's trying to go straight on the whole thing.
Right.
And
Well, you're involved.
just drags him down. Well, you're
Yeah.
involved in the people you're friends with. Maybe you
Mhm.
need to not be friends with certain people because maybe they can only ever drag you down.
Yep. Stop doing things that you know are wrong.
Well, and stop being around people that do things that you
Right.
know are wrong.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
'cause they'll
And
drag
most
you
people,
down.
one of the things that happens with that, and it usually comes with maturity, but hopefully people have someone to push them in the right direction. You keep searing your conscience in such a way that what is wrong no longer stings.
Mhm.
And so that keeps happening. And now you're able to sort of deal with the consequences, as it were, or sear your conscience because you can not feel that that pain, that nudge as much anymore. And you lose discernment. You lose the ability to discern.
Right.
And it's probably most extreme with maybe schizophrenics or some other mental illness where they just sort of lose touch on reality. But almost everyone that's in prison for a significant period of time has had that happen to them, where they've just lost the sense of it. I'm sure there are rare cases where people have just gotten caught up in there in jail for a murder that they shouldn't have committed, but largely it's slow searing of the conscience.
Yep. I like that. Castle.
How you doing?
Welcome, sir.
How are you guys?
Howdy.
Better now that you're here, sir.
Oh, well, that's good to hear.
This stream is incrementally improving. It was me.
I'm so glad.
It was me and Bruce. Now it's me and Bruce and Castle.
I've been incrementally catching up, and here I am.
Yeah.
And, I like to mention that I had made a note while you guys, or actually in the beginning of the commentary, that I was like, oh, there's also, and maybe a foreshadowing of a future stream. I don't know if there's enough content there, but incremental deterioration, as well as Bruce was just kind of talking about. It's like it's the same sort of function, depending on whether or not you have, as Bruce was saying, a telos or a higher, if you've gone astray. I think Manuel has made this point that if you go astray, it means you lost your star. And so I found that really useful. And I also just caught up on Manuel's video today, which was on mystery. And I think that a lot of that stuff is relevant to this here as well. That I had actually made a comment that my understanding of the word mystery is something like a gold mine, in a sense that it's not, like, oh, we need to call Scooby-Doo for whatever this is, but that, that there's something to dig here. But I also kind of there's a lot of caveats with that if you're not, like, you have to assume that you're digging in the right spot, that you have the right equipment and the structure for it, that you're doing it lawfully, like that you're actually allowed to be doing it at all, and there isn't like a reason why you shouldn't, that you actually know what you're doing or are like somewhat competent, and that you aren't doing it completely alone if it can be avoided, like like that whole cooperation thing, like all of that is completely necessary, and you can maybe compromise on like a little bit of it for a little while. And like,
no, that's good. That's good notes. Oh, Adam Jeffrey Jr. Thank you, guys. Our pleasure, sir. Happy that you're engaging and hopefully getting something good out of it. Yeah, I mean sort of the bigger point, Castle, and I'll just mention it here. Obviously, it is 3 streams. You're always incrementing. Like the world is moving whether you're moving or not. Like whether you think you're moving or not, it's not relevant because the world's definitely moving. Even if you think you're not, you probably are too, by the way. So there's always an increment happening. And if you don't have control over that, be worried. Especially if the reason why you don't have control over it is because you're all over the place and you're distracted and anxious and whatever.
Yeah, that's why it's so important. It's so important to have grounded things in your life in that area. And then for me, I have a heart, and I guess I have a heart and a care for men because I feel as though that's kind of, and I've always done that wherever I've lived. In fact, someone's coming over here in a minute, so I'll have to go.
Oh,
But
okay.
like you need people to lean on and constantly give you feedback to some degree, because
Yep.
you'll see the deterioration. Now you can decide to ignore it. You can decide to sear your conscience on that, and then hopefully in that group of peers, they should put the mirror up and say like, hey man, you're like a mess, but it's super important that things aren't meant to be done alone. Like it's gonna fall apart if it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to also kind of support your point a little bit, and the previous point about like being in control of the situation, that maybe you're so far gone and you're, as you say, your conscience is seared and everything, that you actually need to lean completely on the leadership of somebody else, that someone has to be in control, and maybe you can supplement that for a little while, not forever, but that that's also the necessity, I think, of things like mentorship and stuff like that, that the person who is the complete novice can at least rely on the competence and leadership of somebody, until they can start kind of walking without training wheels.
Yeah, you do need to lean on them, and that's a big problem for people that don't have fathers and things like that in their lives, because it's very hard to lean on them,
Yeah.
or siblings, right? There's a lot of one-child households now.
Oh yeah.
Or maybe two with a large gap, things like that. Really hard to lean on them because they're not there, or they're too old.
Right.
And you need that feedback.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's something that like I experienced myself, where it's just kind of like, okay, single parent household, no siblings, that type of thing. It's like exactly as you described. That's something where we had kind of talked a little bit the week before last a little bit about that. There are consequences to not sort of taking up responsibility, and that not only like a cost has to be paid. And that if there's someone there, like eventually you can pass the buck as long as you want, but eventually someone's got to pay it, or at least pay it in part, because that's, with whatever they've got, and so it's difficult. I think there's value in it if it happens to you and then you struggle with it, and everything, but also it's very much not ideal and not something that you should, ever impose on someone knowingly.
Yeah. It'll be worth, Bruce, at some point, you and I doing a live stream on community, and because you've built lots of in-person communities over the years, and I'm more of an online community builder for various reasons, and the utility of that, especially with men's groups, because and I'll have to go again soon, but like I really like your Thursday thing. That's fantastic.
Yeah, there's a little bit of something for everyone usually. And depending on the rapport that you have for the number of people, it can feel like a little bit of a cage match from time to time, but with a lot of handshake. And usually there's a myriad of conversations going on anyway. But
that's healthy. I mean, this is what I was talking about. Like, men need to jostle, and like go at each other pretty hard. I mean, we had the pink sash thing. All right,
great talking to you,
man.
Yeah, we had this pink sash thing on Friday nights. It was just like, it's perfect. It's freaking perfect. Oh, we were brutal.
Oh, yeah, that's hilarious.
Scream and swear at each other all the time, and oh yeah, and we'd always pretty much part friends and whatever. But yeah, it was an expensive time out.
Yeah,
that was every week. We're doing it every Friday.
Oh man, that sounds like so much fun.
It was fun.
Yeah. I used to see these guys. There's a lot of family friends that would they would go, and a lot of these guys were martial artists and stuff. So they'd go and they'd have their hangouts, and it's like, oh, let's have dinner at this person's house. And then it's just like, how long is it going to take for it to turn into a knife fight with dummy daggers? Like that's essentially what's going to happen here in about an hour. Once everybody's food settles, they're going to be out there sparring, and it's great fun. And even the people who are partaking are enjoying themselves. And if they have kids, they're like, okay, we've got a zip tie and a colander here. We're going to turn it into a buckler for you, so you have an advantage. It's like you're 10 years old, perfect. But it's nobody got seriously injured or anything like that. And these people were actual professionals and stuff. So it's like they weren't just kind of flailing around doing ridiculous stuff. But I like those are really fond memories. It's like that was some good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and you only get there through incremental improvement. We used to have a thing in Kempo Karate. They had this 10-point blocking system. And I was thinking about it today, and then I went and just did it. And I was like, excellent. I had tried in the past, and like I always forgot 9 and 10. And I was like, nope, just bang, just like that. I'm like, oh, I must be having a good day today.
It's nice.
The muscle memory was like in place. I'm not saying my form was good. I'm just saying I remembered all the moves.
Yeah.
Well, because you gotta, that's the thing. Like you don't even realize, like when I started, they take all the white belts in particular, right? All the newbies. That was the newbie belt. And what they would do is they would line you up and have you stand in the horse stance, they called it, right? The horse stance. And that was to learn to stand. And then they would just go around the room silently and either tried to push you over or kick your legs and just move your feet for you. Like, what are you doing? And you were supposed to just shut up and do it. And if you want to see incremental improvement in action, I forgot to mention this too. This is why I take notes, although I guess I didn't do a fantastic job this time. Karate Kid. It's incremental improvement, right? And you don't even realize how those parts go together until he's shown the parts going together. And I was like, oh, now I know karate. Right. There you go. And how'd you learn karate? Waxing cars, washing windows, and painting fences.
Right.
And then everything proceeded from there. Oh, the other theme that's in there that people miss, he doesn't know all the forms and the fancy stuff. He just knows the basics really well.
Yeah.
That was me. That was totally me. Because they used to spar me 2 belts up. I never lost a sparring match ever.
Nice.
I had 2 advantages that no one else had. One was I'm just physically fast, really quick. I knocked something off the table the other day and caught it before it went anywhere. It's like it didn't even spill. Like, yep, I'm just quick. But the other one is I have rage.
Right.
So
yeah,
I can harness that, and you can't win. I don't care who you are. It's not gonna work. Rage is an animal all itself, and if you can harness that animal, you're gonna win. It doesn't matter. Yeah,
it's great. It works.
Oh, dude, so rageful. So it's still it's still there. It doesn't go anywhere.
There's this guy. I mean, he was a giant, but in that group of guys that I was talking about, he was presumably still is. Like the guy's not dead. I just haven't talked to him in a long time. But the guy's an absolute giant. He was like kind of Pacific Islander type guy.
Oh,
and he his name was Temujin. And this guy would go and they would have like the Kali stick matches and stuff like that and everything. And the guy would go and he would win so many matches just with presence, because he'd just go and he would just scream and start charging the guy. And it's just like, you just win. Like the person would actually just run away. And most of the time he didn't even have to like make contact with the guy at all. And it's like, yeah, but that's the Napoleon thing too, where it's like, you could, as long as you're shooting the cannons, like they don't need to hit. You know, it's like the guys on the ground can go in and clean up all the guys who are deaf now, you know, and it's like just kind of.
Well, I'm confused and cognitively overloaded.
Right. And plus a ton of smoke and everything too.
Have you ever seen, there's some YouTubes out there with it, but have you ever seen a movie like with the sound off or with no music?
I mean, I've seen like silent movies a couple of times.
No, but like a movie that's supposed to rely on sounds. And you don't hear the sounds, the scenes are completely different.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. There's a few YouTubes about this where they just strip it out.
Yeah.
Watch this scene with the music and watch the scene without the music. And you just like, what happened? You're just like, wait a minute, nothing in the world works the way I thought. What just happened to me? Yeah. It's wild.
I've seen lots of stuff where people have done like silly edits where they'll impose a different soundtrack or something like that.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
Like, oh yeah, that makes a big difference for sure.
Right, it can make a big difference. It's really funny. Yeah, people don't realize that how much because it's part of cognitive load and signaling and stuff. And people don't think in terms of signals; they think in terms of knowledge. I'm like, knowledge is so far up the stack, you should probably actually ignore it.
Yeah,
honestly, just ignore it. Like whatever. Maybe I know something. Maybe I don't. Who cares? Moving right along. Let's move down the stack to something important. What signals am I getting? How am I curating them? How are they being formed? right? Am I getting preformed signals?
Yeah.
Should I rebel against them, or should I accept them? Because that's a big discernment right there. And then what should I do with them once I have them? Yeah, good question.
Yeah, I know there's this one clip that like people were doing this, and like I don't even know it. The intention doesn't matter, but I remember there was this thing that like Trump was doing in an interview, and they took it and they put like ominous like horror music as he's talking, and honestly, it's still one of my favorite clips. Like it's really good, but also a lot of people were just like, "Wow, this is awesome!" Like people were just like, "He's even cooler now." It's just like, yeah, there you go. Like it also doesn't have the desired effect always. So
yeah. What's the guy who did the they're eating the cats? That little clip that have you seen it, where he's carrying cats and stuff, and
I've seen the screenshots and stuff. Yeah,
they're eating the dogs. The guy who did that is a lefty who hates Trump and was trying to make fun of him, and it just didn't work.
Oh yeah.
Well, they think they can yield something like magic or something, and it's like you don't know what you're doing.
Basically,
you have no idea what you're doing.
Every single meme or like remix song or whatever I've seen of Alex Jones actually made him look better. Like I've just like at least because it's like, oh, I just got a laugh out of this guy, and it's like, oh, there's something there where it's like, oh, I have now associated this guy with a pleasant experience because you just did a song about him like hating frogs or something. And then now, like it's like, oh, now I have that stuck in my head. Like, what a cool guy.
But they don't, they don't understand all the parts because they're not used to incremental improvement, and they see a change or they see a way to change something, and so they grab something like a musical score and stick it on top of something else, thinking, well, this musical score is evil or bad or ominous or whatever, or clown-like, and therefore it'll implant on the person because that's how the world works. It's like, that's not how the world works at all. And you don't know that because you don't understand what the parts are, right? You think the parts are way up here, and those aren't the parts, right? And so you've gotten the wrong signal to begin with, and then you're putting other signals on top of it that won't work because they can't work. But you don't know what works and what doesn't work because you haven't done incremental improvement to find out. Because that's how you find out. And the number of people we had this thing a few years ago. One of my last contracts was actually in Colombia. We told this programmer, like, we're taking this computer away. We're decommissioning it. It's going away. So you can't run tests on it anymore. All of your tests have to run in your development environment on your local workstation. 3 times, Castle, 3 times. He could not understand what we were talking about. And I'm like, why are you in this industry? You're clearly too dumb. You don't have the cognitive capacity to program. Like, because it's not like you can learn variables and recursion all day long, but like that doesn't make you a good programmer at all. Like that won't even make you a good scripter. There's things you have to understand about what you're doing that are not optional. And he didn't understand any of it. And I was just like, number of people I've tried to teach to program because they voluntarily wanted to or whatever.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And the number of people that succeeded, like almost zero. It's very bad. Most people can't do most things. Sorry. I don't know what to tell you.
I experienced, so when I became lead dispatcher at the one job that I had, I became essentially the trainer for all the new hires and everything. And a lot of people like outright quit because it was just too much. It was a very complex job that was paying $15 an hour. And it's like, if it snowed, then it's like, you're going to just be here because the other guy can't get in. And it's like, welcome to your 16-hour shift. See you tomorrow. It's just like, that's kind of what would happen. And so you had to really care if you were going to be there or be desperate, for $15 an hour. But even still, in order to survive either way, you had to be competent. And that was one of those things and it also, to your point from a previous time, that intelligence and cognitive capacity are not necessarily the same thing. And so there's a lot of people who are very smart at a few things or could be very smart at many things, but only a couple at a time. And it's like, sorry, there's so many tasks that will come into you sometimes. And then sometimes nothing for weeks, like during winter when, it's just like there would be actually zero things happening for an entire 8-hour shift. And so you would be cognitively underloaded. And then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose in like a 1 hour. And then you have
Right.
to go back to like, after you're all riled up, 4 hours of nothingness, and so like that type of thing would happen to you. And I had a coworker who was, and this is an interesting thing, she was available. Hey, how's it going? She was very reliable. So like she was available all the time. She lived further away from anybody. And even if it was storming or snowing or whatever, she would get there. Like she might show up late, but if someone was needed, she would get there. And she was the oldest person as well. Like she was probably in her 70s or something like that, but very reliable. And I love this lady. Like every now and then I still check in on her every few months or something like that.
Oh,
She's
great.
great. And it's been like 3 years since we worked together or something like that, but she's wonderful. And but the thing is that she could not get a lot of the procedures done. Like actually could. That we had off and on done training and stuff, and like she had spent entire like night shifts with me. There had been times when I had stuck around, like she would cover the night shift and then I was working middle shift, and I would stay 4 hours with her or something like that and get home at 5 a.m. or something. But I would do that type of thing, and I loved our conversations, and she taught me how to crochet and all these things, and it was really good.
Oh, cool.
But I made some scarves and everything. It was great. But my gear is in the closet. But I like this lady. She couldn't actually get the more complex functions down, and she actually outlasted me there. Like eventually, I left, and she stuck around for a while. But it was a difficult thing. But the fact that she was the most reliable was actually it countered the other stuff. Like she was able to at least get and reel in help long enough that she actually wound up leaving of her own volition. That eventually there was a disagreement with management, as basically everyone had. But these things kind of happen. But at least there was that. So she compensated enormously with that, with cooperation, where she didn't have the cognitive capacity to watch a huge amount of things. Like I would see it happen, but when I was there, like it wasn't an issue. Where you would get a certain number of phone calls or a certain number of things come in or something, and maybe she was answering the phone and doing data entry, but she couldn't also monitor cameras, alert system, and radio all at the same time. Fair enough. Almost no one could, and like people much younger couldn't do that. And but I would say her like completely miss it and like actually just wouldn't be aware that it happened. And it's like that's okay. Like at the end of the day, she managed, and if they didn't have her, they would have had no one like on many shifts.
Right.
And maybe like to your previous point about management not knowing their people as well, like that might have been something to consider. If maybe we should have 2 people at this time, or maybe we could move the shifts around or overlap, something like that. It wasn't properly managed, and resources weren't utilized correctly, and that
management's hard.
Yeah, it was not the only manifestation of that, and it wasn't just people, but these things happen. But I've talked enough. How's it going, Centro?
Hello.
How you doing, man?
Pretty good.
Yeah?
Good. I'm going to have a hard out fairly soon, but not too soon. So, yeah.
Tell us all your wisdom on incremental improvement then. Quick.
Dude, this is like, that's my life is incremental improvement, dude. I eat sweat, breathe incremental improvement.
Excellent.
That's the way, dude. Ever since I was a little kid, like that's how it was. Early sports really helps with that cooperation, all that. It's super easy, especially when you start young. Any type of sports is really, really healthy for any kid. And the thing that like the people that don't get it, it's like you just have to get good at one thing. That's it. Set your sights really small. That's part of incremental, right? Get really low. Get really, really low. Say, I'm just going to do this thing 3 times, 4 times, 1 time, but just consistently and grow it. But if you get good at one thing, it's very easy to get good at other things. Not instantly, but you see the pattern of it because you've already climbed one mountain. How hard can another be? And that's the thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, once you've incrementally improved, you've climbed one mountain. Now you know how to climb mountains, right? To some
Yeah.
extent, you know how to climb every mountain, but like you
Right.
know how to climb mountains, right?
And once you climb one mountain, that's when you can start discerning the landscape and going,
Yes.
oh, okay. See, that's why you know, a lot of these guys, like, they get overloaded because they're like, well, what should I focus on? It's like none of it actually.
Right.
If you watch the Karate Kid, the original, and just know that he is a being as good person, not emergence as good, the whole movie makes a lot of sense.
Ooh, I never thought of it that way.
They both are. Mr. Miyagi and Daniel are both being as good.
Danielson. Yeah.
No, not
Danielson.
No. And he gets frustrated with him. It's like, it's great. It's so great. It's like that. You know, you just got to sand the deck like 1,000 times. just do it. Do one deck and you'll feel amazing. Clear one field. Take down one tree. You'll feel amazing. You'll feel amazing.
Oh yeah. No, me working in the yard, like just cutting trees down or whatever, you know, cleaning things up. It's like, this is great.
Yeah.
It's
and what you were saying earlier too about listening to stuff while focusing, it's like I like testify. I'm the same way. I'm like, no, I'm paying attention. I have to, or else I'm gonna miss something. Just another day, just another psyop, right?
Yeah, you'll miss something. But people don't realize it. It's like, no. You'll consciously miss something. Your unconscious won't miss that at all.
Right.
And you don't know what it is, and you don't know what it's doing to you. You have no idea. I mean,
you know those moments when you think you miss one, you pause, you go back, you're like, I knew I caught you. Like, it just felt uncomfortable.
There's 2 different comments on that video from different people talking about that. Talking about, wow, I didn't realize that happened to me, but it does, and now I have to pay attention to it. I'm like, dude, I was on the verge of tears. I'm like, my work is done here now. I can shut down my YouTube channel and go home. Like, we are finished. That is, I didn't even expect it to happen that way. But well, and actually, that's all your fault. So thank you for the suggestion on the commentaries. Entirely you.
Are you doing more of that same video? Because that,
Oh, man. Dude, 2 and 3 are recorded.
Oh,
I just have to record part 4. No, I was.
I'm excited, dude. Yeah. Oh man, that was great. I've only seen the first part. It was great. Great.
You wait till we get to part 3, man.
Yeah.
Wow. I have an insight based on Jordan Hall, and I was like, "Whoa! I didn't even see that." Like, not that I didn't see that. I didn't see that in John, even though it was there from the beginning. And the Neoplatonism becomes 100% clear as to why they're going there. And I'm like, and then it's like, now ever since that, I've been like, why didn't I see that? I should have totally seen that. And it's like, it's no word of a lie. I hate the way this sounds, but also this is the God's honest truth. Couldn't imagine anyone being that dumb. I couldn't. I'm like, no one would do that. Like, that wouldn't be your solution. But it is. And I'm like, oh my God. And then it explains why they always talk about the one and the unity in the Neoplatonism. And they never talk about the many. What's the many? How do you discern the many? How does the many turn into the one? They never talk about any of that. They just talk about the one. Well, they're non-dualists. What's non-dualism? Could be 0, 1, 3, or more. I would never assume anybody would go under the number 2 if they hit the limits of number 2.
Right.
But that's exactly what they're doing. They've already rejected 3. They've already rejected the Trinity. So they go to the 1. And now it all makes sense. Like, a bunch of things that I was like, well, whatever, this is silly. But now it's like, oh, no, that's perfectly logical. It's retarded, but it's perfectly logical.
Right. It's rational. It's logical. Yeah, it's reasonable. It's supporting my frame. Exactly.
So I saw
that's when the world starts flattening out. You just see it curving and starting to flat. And you're like, oh, they're flattening out. Like really, if you're like in a movie, like look at the world down there. It's flattening out. Like
I saw some insanity today that is like completely relevant. So there is I was looking at this thing because I was trying to find a particular quote for tomorrow's book club. And because we might actually do 3 chapters tomorrow. Probably not. But if we do, I'll have my notes ready. And if not, I'll be ready for next week. So, But I was looking at this thing and I was like, I wanted to find this particular quote, which I had literally just read like 2 weeks ago or something. So I knew it existed. I knew it was there. And so I find a website, and I didn't really vet the website yet, but I sure did afterwards. And I was looking for a quote from Saint Irenaeus from one of his books. And I was like, I realized that I was like, it's going to be such a pain if I actually go and try to look for it myself and everything. So hopefully somebody has it. And it is related to the Sabbath because we have chapter 49. Hopefully tomorrow we'll be able to go over. And a lot of people's complaints that I've been hearing for the last like 8 weeks will be hopefully assuaged. But I was looking at this and I found this website where they're like, oh, here's all the stuff on like the church fathers talking about the thing, and they had like a book, so here's all these excerpts and stuff. And it was just like a wall of text, and I was like, why is this like left-wing meme? Like I'm just looking for just like one thing. And then I see this whole thing where they're like trying to actually discount the Sabbath by using like the words of a bunch of saints about why you shouldn't do it. And I was like, that's interesting. Like these people claim to, and then I was like, oh, what do they claim? Like I was kind of mid thought. I was like, oh, these people seem to claim to be, and I was like, oh, let's see what they're actually about. And then I find out that these people are actually calling themselves non-Trinitarian Christians.
Yep.
And I was like, there you go. And I was like, oh, that's interesting that immediately what they zero in on is the Sabbath as well. And I was like, there's a lot of really interesting legalism where they actually reference like the books that I was looking at and the people that I was looking to get the quote about. And they actually completely missed it and just wrote the exact, like in this case, like I avoid the word opposite, but they wrote the opposite. Like they were in opposition to it.
Right.
And I was like, that is fascinating. And they were super legalistic. Like they actually explained their thing. I only spent like 2 minutes before I'd had to be just like, this is the worst. But they kind of explained what they were doing. And they said, a lot of these things that I like identify against basically. But like they actually name themselves non, like that's the first thing in what they're saying.
Identify against.
Yeah. Then I was just like, wow. And that when they say that, they're like, oh, because these particular words aren't in the Bible. It's like, wow, that's fascinating that you couldn't find it in English and you couldn't think of it. Like there's no other words like it could possibly be. It has to be this one. But like they didn't get it. And I was like, I have to just abandon these people because that's too much.
No, there was a guy on BOM. He used to call himself Sam Adams, but I guess his name is Sam Tiedemann, and he's up in the Chicago type area, and he's a non-Trinitarian, alleged Christian, and then he keeps getting quote thrown out of churches, which is not actually what's happening at all, but he claims it is because he wants to be a victim. You'd be horrified to know that's what he's doing, but actually it's exactly what he's doing, and they just told him, like, you can't sing, you can't play instruments, and your wife can't teach children because Protestants somehow believe that words are infections. And so if you have bad theology and you're around other people, you might infect them with your bad theology. and right. And so that doesn't mean they don't want you there. They still want you there because they want the opportunity to redeem you or save you, or whatever the hell the Protestants think how this all works. But they can't have you anywhere near other people in an elevated position, and they don't have a way to deal with any of that. So he did this whole stream about how he was excommunicated from a Universalist Unitarian church, and I was like, you can't be excommunicated from a Universalist church. That doesn't make any sense.
Hierarchy.
Right. Yeah.
I just want to take a quick moment to make 2 notes. One, I don't know if you saw me eating my note on the limits of absurdity, that I'm literally here at my desk roasting marshmallows. But also, I wanted to say that your lack of notes that you lamented earlier, I would have been disappointed, topically speaking, if you actually had complete notes on this. So I'm glad that you did. So well done.
I had a lot of notes.
But you said you didn't prepare as much as you wanted, and I would have been
upset. No, I missed a bunch of stuff. I missed a bunch of stuff.
I would have been disappointed.
It's weird. Like, was it 2 streams ago? I had no notes at all. I like one line or something, and I did great. But this one, I had all these things to talk about, and Which funny too. I was thinking all day today about my notes because I didn't do them yesterday. I had to do them today. I had all the notes, but I what I do is I take notes. Like I was at a thing last night, and I have my Chromebook with me. They were doing a talk for the so-called Silicon Swamp that we do down here in South Carolina. So I attend in person sometimes when I can. And it was on AI and healthcare. So I'm like, well, I got to go to that. And I have my Chromebook open, my brand new nice Chromebook. And a thought came to me that was relevant. So I had to put it in a Google Doc. I had to transcribe that from the Google Doc into my my Notepad++ text file, right? And throw that in there. But like then I have to organize everything because usually the notes, although to be fair, they magically come out in order most of the time, which is just I don't know what to make of that. I have no idea.
Don't look at it too closely.
But a lot of times I have to reorganize them because it's a certain format. You don't want to jump all over the place, right? And they are done in sections, usually 3 or 4 line sections. That's how I've organized them, just to make it easier to read. And then I highlight them as I'm going. And there's all kinds of stuff going on behind the scenes that people don't see. But then, like I said, I think it was 2 streams ago, I had like no notes, like none. I had like 1 sentence on what I was talking about. I was like, all right, well, let's try this. And I've done that before. So I knew, I knew it was okay. But yeah, but like I missed a bunch of stuff. Like I wanted to talk about Karate Kid earlier in the monologue, and there's a couple of things I missed. I was like, damn, how did I manage that? So I thought I had enough notes that it would come back, right? And but I was pondering like maybe I should do this the way most other people do it, which is just bullet items, and then they go off the bullet items.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I can't do that because there's some very specific points I need to make in a very specific way, and my brain is all over the place. So when it comes to me, I just got to write it down. I just have to. And then some things came to me during the monologue tonight, for example, that I was like, oh, that's really good. Why didn't I come up with that sooner? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Here now. Keep going. So yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, but how do you learn to take notes? Incremental improvement, right? Like all these things. How do you learn karate? Incremental improvement. How did you ever learn anything? Incremental improvement. And if you got information without that, you didn't learn it. You didn't. That's the problem. And that's the world we're living in. That's why the competency crisis is here. Because people didn't actually learn things. They were told things and they're doing things the way they were told. But they didn't actually learn them. And so they don't know how they work. So they don't know when they're good and when they're bad. And they don't know how they operate. So they can't modify them to be better. And they can't change them when the world changes, right? And yeah, you see that everywhere. There were a bunch of things. So not too far from me, there's the flooding in the mountains in southern Appalachia from Hurricane Helene, which thankfully almost nothing happened here. It was a lot of wind and a lot of rain. And I was actually, we were fairly concerned, like, this is a big storm. This is finally, I'm going to get a big hurricane. I've been down here a long time. I haven't gotten a big hurricane. And then, pretty much nothing. I mean, a lot of people in Columbia proper had flooding and problems. I lived in a place that can't flood, basically. So it's not a big deal. But I was a little concerned and nothing happened. But down the street, 3 hours away, we got people trapped. We have whole towns and stuff and up and down the mountain area that are destroyed. Whole highways, super highways gone and stuff like that. I guess you can't get into Tennessee from North Carolina anymore. Like it's bad. It's really bad. So they were talking about FEMA's failures. I think, well, FEMA just used to operate a certain way. And what a lot of people don't realize is Hurricane Katrina broke FEMA completely. Because the feds tried to overplan and New Orleans lied. The mayor's actually on tape admitting lying to the feds about preparedness, which is one of the reasons why Katrina was so bad for New Orleans. But what happened was all the people, Maine in particular comes to mind, but a lot of people in New England, like New England's a very help the community type of place, like as a region. And they sent a lot of water and a lot of supplies. And then I think it was a year or two later, or maybe whatever. It was just after Katrina. Might have been 3 years after Katrina. I don't remember. Maine had a big disaster with a bunch of power outages, and so did like Vermont and New Hampshire. And FEMA didn't help. Emergency, right. And then ever since then, I've noticed, a lot of people haven't noticed, FEMA's been screwed. And that part of that is they said, you're not helping us, we're not helping anymore. Like, no one wants to help us when we have a problem. We never have problems because we're hardy New Englanders. Fair enough. But like every once in a while, everybody's got a problem, and you're not going to help us when we have a problem. Well, screw you. You know, to FEMA, not to the people, obviously. And now the problem they have down here is, and there's lots of reports of this, they're telling private helicopter pilots they can't fly their private helicopters and help people.
Mm.
And I actually saw one post on Twitter where the guy was like, you know, the Louisiana whatever squad is up here, and we have, you know, free rides for people who are trapped, and no word of a lie. The guy posted this on freaking Twitter. Free swamp visits to the swamps of Louisiana for people who get in the way. It's like, hell yeah, that is the correct answer. Also surprised you wrote that on Twitter, but I'm glad you did. Well, good people need to know. We're not going to put up with this. You can't stop. You can be the government all day long. You can be a government official all day long. I don't care. You're not going to stop people from helping people. And if you do, you're a bad person, and you deserve whatever you get. Sorry. And what you get is not going to be good for you. I can tell you that. But also, like, don't be bad. Don't be a horrible person. How's that for a start? Yeah, this one guy, like, he had a helicopter. They were calling for small helicopters because large helicopters can't land everywhere. Unstable ground. Military helicopters can be quite large, right? And the little 2-person, 3-person, 4-person helicopters, which I've been up in one once, is pretty cool. They're well suited for some of this work, especially to land on private property in the woods where you may only have a driveway. So this guy went up with his son, and they're dropping off supplies. And this person's waving, and the son's like, no, it looks like a help me wave, not a high wave. So they come down, and they're like, you know, we're trapped. We need to get out of here. So he says, all right, I'm a little worried about the stability of the driveway. So I'm going to leave my son with your husband, and you're going to come with me, and then we'll come back and get, you know, I mean, one person at a time, right? So he leaves his son there. He goes back with the woman back to this place that he already flew over. And like one of the local officials comes up to him and says, no, you can't fly. You can't go back there. And he's like, well, what? Like, it's my helicopter. I can do whatever I want. And then he mentions, like, he's got free fuel because people have donated cash to buy fuel for helicopters. So if you have a helicopter right now in that area, you could just get free fuel if you're volunteering, helping people. Mm. So, right. All he's doing is wear and tear on the helicopter and his time and his pilot skills. Right. So he's like having this argument with the guy, like, no, bro, like, these people are trapped. And he's like, well, we're going to march up there and get them. And he's like, yeah, but I have a helicopter. I can get them in like now. It's a 3-minute flight, you know, like it's 6 minutes round trip. What are you doing? Right. And the guy threatened him and said, like, no, if you do it again, you'll be arrested and all this nonsense. And I was just like, probably would have knocked him out right then and there. That's just me, though. Like, I'm like, yeah, I'll put up with your bullshit for 0 seconds. Like, you screw with me and it's all over for you. Like, and that may not be evident to you in the moment, or I might knock you out because I've done that before. Like, sometimes you just got to take an action against evil. So the guys actually took him aside and said, look, if you land over there, you know, like not too far away, right? We'll keep him away from you and you won't get arrested. So like the other guys had to interfere. And the guy actually threatened him and said, like, well, the FAA wants to talk to you. And he found out later, after he went and got the other 2 out of there, his son included, that the FAA had restricted the airspace above the area right after he was there. And he waited at one of these airports for the FAA official to show up, and he never did. So he's like, all right, well, I'm out of here. But Like, no, dude, look, it's a helicopter. There's nothing you can do. Okay, get over it. Like, you're not preventing helicopters from flying over areas. That's not a thing that you can do in the world. So just give up. But it's bizarre what's going on because FEMA's not there, and they blew all the money ahead of time, and they've just completely collapsed, and no one sort of and that's been like that for years, by the way. No one's really noticed, but that was because of Hurricane Katrina. I noticed. I saw it all happen when it happened, and I was telling people, and just nobody believed me. But different problem. This is the life. It's not a good world. It's very chaotic.
The curse of seeing the yellow sign spread.
I know. Oh, dude, it's awful. It's most days. People are like, why don't you go out more? And I'm like, what, are you kidding me? I already see too much. The more I'm out, the more I see.
You're like,
I don't want to do that. Yeah, it's like it's like
crow
being in a
just looks at you
Lovecraft
funny.
novel.
You're like, shit.
It's like being in a Lovecraft novel and seeing, seeing past the curtain that Lovecraft kind of talks about, right? And it's like, why don't you want to go out? And it's like, because I can see the damn curtain, you Muppets. Like, why do I want to see more of that?
That's the Protestant thing too, right? Because they're like, don't infect this church with your other ideas and languages.
It's so weird. It's such a weird.
Yeah, I often hear like, they felt people that go to those churches, they feel like they're nice to them, but they don't feel welcome.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like they're respectful, but they don't feel welcome.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that I kind of briefly talked, sort of buttressing Bruce's point earlier about this necessity of kind of, and it was also riffing on something that Mark said in the monologue about the necessity of like cooperation and leadership as well to kind of foster the space so that you can have incremental improvement, and that's one of those things as well, is that if you have and I said that to the point about needing to be in control of a certain situation, like someone has to. Maybe the person who's doing the incremental improvement is like in rehab or something like that. Like the control is outsourced. Like someone's in control, but it and that's necessary. But like at least until the training wheels can come off, like that's kind of necessary. But I think there's also kind of like, even if something's not necessarily wrong, that if you're actually trying to build anything, there's that necessity of invitation. Like in the video that you had linked to me, Mark, a while back, that you mentioned, and it was so interesting because it was like you linked it to me, and I was like, "Did you just have this conversation last week?" Oh no, it was 3 years ago, and it was like very, very relevant, very, very topical. But this thing about that there's tolerance, and then there's welcoming, and then there's actual like wanting or like invitation, And maybe invitation is like the action, that proceeds from the wanting or something like that. But
Right.
But those different stages is that I've been in lots of places where I was like merely tolerated, and it's just like that's not where it's like, okay, yeah, like whatever, like you can sit over there or whatever. It's like, no thanks, Whereas there's other places where it's like just this week, and even actually just today, but the request was a couple of days ago. There's stuff where it's just like, hey, I've got something that I think you could do. And I'm like, are you sure you want me to do it? Like they're like, oh, do you have any experience with this? And I was like, actually 0. And I actually don't know what all the words you just said mean either. Like I know a lot of words, but I don't know like all the ones that you just said. And so like, are you sure you want me to do this? And they're like, I have confidence that you'll be great. And it's like, that I will be. Like, that's just what's gonna, and it did go very well. But it was the fact of like, I was invited to do something that was well above my station, like just well above my station, and it was a great honor, and it was a wonderful opportunity and stuff, and like good boost for incremental, improvement. I think like a major boost after just a nightmare week, but high contrast, so that I could see that today, and so like I was really grateful for that, but I've never gotten that anywhere else. Like that is a rare thing indeed, but also something that it's like, wow, if you were to actually have people participate in that, or participate as the leader who's fostering the the sort of mentorship or what have you in that you would see a lot more competence, I think. by having,
Mhm.
I think of kind of like, those little skinny trees that they put like the pole next to and they tie it together and everything. It's just like, yeah, you like do that with people,
Right.
I mean, like
I just pictured you walking up to a stranger and
just wrapping them
very
around.
happily wrapping them around a pole. They're just looking at you.
Yeah, this is for your own good.
Well, and it is, and that's what everyone's complaining about. They're complaining about the constraint and the imperfection required to be competent in a way they can't by themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't realize most incremental improvement is enabled by a bunch of other people.
Mhm.
Right. So you learn to play the guitar. Did you make the guitar? I don't think so. Did one other person make the guitar? Probably not. Who tuned the guitar? Was it you? Right. Like this. So there's all this enablement going on from the world, and we have no gratitude, and we have no sense of what that is or how that works. And we're completely unappreciative of having a world where you can incrementally improve. It's sort of sad, right? But you can.
Yeah.
I have a buddy that who lives out by Detroit, and he's like 30 something, working, married, got a couple dogs, and he really likes to play guitar, but he just plays by himself, and he's just doing it with like the computer and recording little riffs, and then he got doing it like with his cousin, but still like just not enough. So then I talked to him, and we came up with a plan for him to go find like a guitar club. So he found a guitar club, and turns out he makes this really good relationship with the other members of the guitar club. Some of them are actually old guys that used to be professional bands, and they're retired now, and they have kids and stuff like that. And they all just start writing music, and just them hanging out with beers, writing music, doing all the time. Now they're doing a gig every Saturday night at this bar, and they're getting recorded, and it's all because they're just volunteering their time, doing the thing they love. And it's and that's how he got his desire to, because one of his desires was to get better, but he wasn't able to do it by himself. Like it wasn't just play guitar, but then by doing it in a setting with goals and cooperation, he got his wish and more. So the wish was to get better. He got better. He got a lot better, and now he has friends, and now they're all recording stuff, and it's great, and it's wonderful. He's super happy.
And that's that nonlinear scaling as well. And it's just like you reach your limit, and then it's just like, okay, now I've got to break out of frame in order to and that you also can't occupy the entire frame yourself if you get into a bigger frame.
Right. Yeah, and he's one of two guitarists, and that's perfect for him.
Nice.
He tells me all about it, like how they swing in and out, on the parts where he's like, oh, I can't do the solo part, so he does that part. And I was like, that's cool.
No, that's great. Yeah, and and when you incrementally improve, learn how those pieces go together to build a base to improve further. And that's what competency is. It's built of incremental improvement. And that's how it increases. Right? And we just have too many things we can do alone by ourselves, like, make our own video game. I was like, that's really bad for you, though, because then what you learn is you make your own video game and no one wants to play it because no one knows about it.
No.
Right? Because you got to make it, you've got to polish it, you've got to QA it, and you've got to advertise it, right? You got to market it, right? And then you got to manage all the engagement, whether it's sales and support and whatever it is, right? It's a pain. Like, it's a lot of work. And why do you want to do that yourself? You're not going to be good at all those things.
Right.
Most software engineers can't do debugging to save their ever-loving souls. They can't. They can't debug anything. I'm like, but you wrote the code. You really can't debug it? And they can't. And I'm like, God, I can debug code without seeing it. It's just go, God, that error is either this or this or this. And they're like, how did you do that? And I'm like, I don't know. I just know how the pieces work because I learned them all.
Right. And then you weren't told how to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that it's the practice thing. Like those,
But
like
you don't start there though, right? Like I literally started with basic beginner's all-purpose symbolic instruction code, which is a very high-level language, and I went down to assembly, and then I went back up the stack, right? And now learning languages is easy because I know how they're formed and what all the components are.
That was like when I started that dispatch gig, like I was actually afraid of like answering phones and stuff. It's still a pain, but it's not something I'm afraid of. And I remember starting that, and I I was going in, I was getting ready to get trained on like I started my first 2 days was night shift. With my trainer is actually still a friend that I see, every now and then, which is great. And she even started going to church, and I was like, "Oh, here's this lady. She's gone for 50 years or something like that. She's back into it." But she trained me for 2 days. That was the training I got, and then for this job that I've kind of described as very like a lot, there's a high dropout rate, and then I go in and say, "Okay, time to do the busy shift," because like night shift was okay. The first 2 hours are the most perilous, and then after that, everybody's asleep. And so I get ready for that, and I go in for the shift. I see the lady and she had been there for like 7 or 8 years or something like that, and they're like, "Oh, we want you to like sign some papers or something like that before you get started." So I was like, "Okay, we'll sign the papers." Come back, she's gone. Like I see her leaving. And I was like, okay, well, like that was my trainer that just walked away. Like, where'd she going? And they're like, oh yeah, she's fired. They're like, you can do this, right? I was like, I guess. And then they just had me working her shifts. Like I just got her shift. That was
Wow.
The old bait and switch.
yeah. But yeah. And then so the lady who was on night shift wound up taking her shift, and that's how I ended up on night shift, even though that's not what I signed up for like 6 months. But which also resulted in when you talked about like the kind of having to sort of detox your friend group and stuff. Like that was an interesting thing that actually like just the people who were for sure my friends are the only ones that were still there after 6 months. Like that was actually like everybody else was completely gone after that. After that point, it was really useful for me. Like I didn't realize that I needed that. As well.
That's a very good point.
Yeah,
burning off the deadwood's huge.
Yeah.
Huge. Because it's going to happen too, so expect it.
Yeah.
Anybody that's starting out, it's like, people are going to
early and
try to keep you down, and some people are going to be really inspired that you're doing it and help you out.
Yeah.
And you'll know who your real friends are, if any.
Yeah, people who are positive, when you do stuff in particular.
Yeah.
Right. And not when you do things that they do. When you do things they don't do and they're still positive. Right. About it. That's what you want. Like I remember, so my best friend, I was talking to him once, and he had years ago, he purchased this really nice high-end Sony TV, 46-inch, which is, the biggest at the time or something. It was a Sony, and all these features, this fantastic TV. And I told him once, I said, my big dream is to have a TV better than yours. And he was like, well, that's great. I hope you get there, Mark. Because he's my best friend. So, yeah.
And by the way, out there to anyone that's listening, if you ever meet a girl who treats you that way and is your cheerleader no matter what, and even if it's something she doesn't understand, you put a ring on that.
Yeah, immediately. Like,
do not accuse her of trying to change your world for the bad.
Yeah. A lot of people do. Yeah. No, it's weird. I remember too, like when I was first consulting, I was always upset because consultants, and this is a fair, apparent external critique of consultants, they usually aren't busy. They're not paid to be busy generally, right? They're paid to be available.
Yep.
They're paid for their availability. So you show up and you do 1 hour of work, and that's it. But that's what you're paid for. Right. And that's the thing. I mean, in the beginning, you do a lot of analysis work and study, and like in the beginning, it's a lot of work. But also, so the last contract I did, the last big contract I did, we did 4 days in Nashville, Tennessee. So I loved it. Oh, I wish we had gotten that. The people managing the contract were moronic, and I lost it. But I wish we had gotten that contract because the guy we were working for, he knew all the restaurants and he liked to eat well, and that was all company expense. So I was eating like a frickin' king at like good Indian food and Chinese food places and Thai places, and it was phenomenal. It was so good. But like there came a point, it was an evaluation because we were trying to get the contract. So we were being paid to do an evaluation and give a report. Now, my job was not to give a report, right? I wasn't like, that wasn't in the cards for me. They didn't say anything about that, but whatever. Like, I know how to do that. It's not a big deal. But at the end of day 3, he comes to me and he says, hey, they want you to give a presentation on version control and how to use Git, based on questions. Because I'd ask these questions like, well, how do you do this? And how do you do that? And, why don't you do it this way, sort of things. And they were like, what? I was like, oh no, they just don't know what they're doing. Fair. Software engineers never know version control. They don't know how to do version control well on average. It's not on average. 99.9% of them are complete morons at it. And fair enough. Like, they learn programming. They didn't learn, workflow with version control, which is a very tricky thing if you don't.
They didn't learn restraint.
Right. Well, yeah, that's the big problem in the industry.
I will code the heavens.
He goes, look, let me know what you need for slides. We'll stay up all night. We'll work on this. And I just looked at him and I go like, no, you know what? They've got a big whiteboard at the front of the room that's basically the whole wall. Like, I'm just going to use that. And he's like, what? And I'm like, trust me, I got this. And he's like, really? And I had been right about a bunch of things because he was a management consultant guy, right? But I'm like the techie. Like, I know all the technical stuff. It's ridiculous. So I was just like, no, I got this. So he had already trusted me after like 3 days. He's like, okay, but let me know if you want to do slides or whatever. If you want to go over the presentation. And I'm like, nah, I'm just going to wake up in the morning. And then when we get there, I'll just do it when you ask me to on the fly. But like, I can do that. Like, I have that set of skills. I didn't when I started. Okay. Like, when I started in the industry, I couldn't do that for sure. It's something that I learned incrementally over time, over a lot of years, right? Over a lot of contracts, right? Over a lot of working with people up until midnight to put together presentations. Like, because with presentations, you got to know your audience and you got to know what they want out of the presentation. And that's what determines your presentation. If you get the same presentation over and over again, you're an idiot. Like, you don't know presentations very well. It's not to say you didn't put together a good presentation. You might have, but like, you really need to know your audience. And you need to know not only who your audience is, because that tells you what slides you need or what presentation style you need, and also how much information they need. You also need to know what they need to get out of it, so you know what to emphasize within the subject matter that you're doing. And so, you can play tricks. Some people, I've seen people do it who are very, very good. And they've got these 100 slide decks, and they customize them, when they get to the customer site. Like, they're all prepped. That's not my style. And it's not that I've never done that. I have had to do that in the past. It's not a big deal. Like, I can do that too. But like, these guys just needed to understand something. And I needed the one-on-one interaction with questions. But because version control is something I'm actually a very, very expertise at, like expertise 100%, right? Like, all the way up. So I was like, no, I know where these guys are coming from, why they're confused, and how to bridge that gap. Because I had done the analysis, right? So you do all the analysis up front, and then I can just do the flow thing. Like, what do people need to know? I mean, one of the things that helped me was somebody asked for this live stream specifically, and I got to talk to him a few hours before it started, right? And that didn't change much because I already knew my audience. I already know this guy, right? He's been on the Discord. We've talked for hours and hours and hours. So I was like, all right, I know sort of, and maybe I screwed up. Maybe he'll tell me, like, no, Mark, I needed to know this. I don't know. Right. But like, I have an idea of where it is I think he's at and how he likes the messaging and what he, hears, right? What he responds to and what he doesn't. All of that informed the monologue, right? And all I did was, when I talked to him, I added a few things that he brought up that I was like, oh, okay, that's, good. You're confused about that. Excellent. I can clear that up. That's not a problem. I don't know if I succeeded, by the way, but at least I had that direction, right? And that's really important. But man, when I was first consulting, I did not like that I had to sit there, because I'd do the analysis and I'm fast. I'm fast at everything. So I do this analysis, and people are like, well, we've got 3 more weeks to do analysis. I'm like, yeah, it takes me like 3 days. Sorry. Also, I'm done. So what do you want to do? Like, like, it's done. You can refer to it. Here's the documentation. Like, you wrote documentation. I'm like, yeah, I would write documentation. Like, duh. Like, that was my big thing. I document everything. And they're like, oh my God. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm done. And they're like, well, yeah, but we've got 3 more weeks. Just sit here. We'll come with you with questions. And then I'd go and work on other things. But it's hard to come. Well, you guys are paying me. I should be busy. No, not necessarily. But it was years of incrementally learning how to do those things efficiently before I could do that. It wasn't like the first time I did it.
Sorry, so short. I have to go.
It's good to see
Good to see you, my friend.
At least have a good talk. Incremental.
Go improve incrementally.
Yes. What Mark said earlier was really important about applying that to everything. Like everything that you're doing, be present to the thing that you're doing. You think it's boring, it's not boring. You get better at stuff. And then when you get in that flow state, you can work on other things incrementally. But get good at one thing, master one thing, and you can go to anything. Good.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
See you guys later. Have a great night.
You too. That was great. I love Sanjuro. He's awesome.
Oh, it's always good to talk to him.
I didn't realize that was a movie. So, and then I downloaded the movie and it came with all this commentary and I'm like, oh, it's not what I wanted.
No, what was?
Sanjuro, the movie.
Oh.
So now I have the movie. So I will
nice.
watch it. Maybe I'll watch it tonight, in fact. We'll see.
If it's good, let me know. I mean, it's good enough to be named after, so it must be great.
Already know it's good. I don't need to know anymore. I already have the information.
Fair enough.
Sanjuro says it's good, and he's super reliable on movies. He also lives in Hollywood, so he knows all these things.
There you go.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not in Hollywood, but very near Hollywood,
adjacent.
In the area.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. But yeah, I like the idea of really trying to apply that to everything, and I think if I could also kind of tie a little bit together of both what Sanjuro and Bruce talked about, that there's the sort of searing of your conscience, but also the burning of dead wood, and I think there is a certain degree of maybe doing it too often, but it's kind of hard to reach the point of doing it too much. That they're at regular intervals, maybe you could even say like early and often. It's kind of like, I mean, I think of like windshield wipers or something. That also, the faster you're going, the faster the windshield wipers need to go if it's raining. So depending on outdoor conditions, but also like you can temper that a bit with, you look at washing your dish or something like that. Like maybe you go for a second helping of a meal or something. Like you don't need to get a brand new dish or something like that in a longer thing, but just to kind of realize like you're not going to leave that overnight and then reuse it or something like that.
Right.
There is a certain point of, okay, maybe a few minutes or maybe a few hours or something like that, like acceptable, but decay does start to set in when there is material that can decay that's present.
Right.
So that's important to address, so that you can continue doing that stuff and not have to stop and be a pit crew to go and now do damage control, which is then going to knock off your incremental improvement.
Right. But also the incremental improvement, again, it leaves you available to do the thing when the thing needs done.
Right. Yeah.
You're not really losing anything, right? And you're also not burning yourself out, because one of the problems with, like one of the things I used to do is, I've talked about this before, like you can code or you can do automation work, but the two are fundamentally at odds in terms of cognitive load.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a whole switching in the way you're thinking to string things together for automation from design and implementation of software. The two have actually no overlap, oddly enough, even though you might use variables and recursion in both. And so I'm one of these rare people that can switch between them, but that switch is really hard and expensive.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It just takes a lot of mental energy. But there have been times when I've been doing, a lot of automation work, for example, and then I need to go to code and there's nothing in the tank.
Yeah.
There's nothing left in the tank, and the switch costs money already. And then you try, yeah, you can't do it. And then when I got my illness and stuff, and I had to measure energy all the time, I had to figure out, because if you code, so one of the problems that you don't really understand is that you don't know when you're overloaded.
Mm.
And so, especially if you haven't trained yourself. And so I actually had to develop tests to know when I had the capacity to code. Because if you start coding when you don't know how to code, you're just going to screw it up really badly. And so I actually had a couple of tests that I developed. And now every once in a while, I used to use them all the time because I was a lot sicker before, but like I still use them every once in a while. I'm like, can I do some AI work today or not? Because a lot of that is like, oh, you got to be really on top of your game to pull that off. And then I'd run the test, and it's like, yep, okay, I passed the test. I'm good to go.
Yeah. Well, it's like you talked about earlier, the that you run on these sort of cycles as well, and like that'll happen also
Yeah.
during the day, but also that might happen on a day-to-day basis or a week-to-week basis or
Week to
something
week
like that.
basis. Yep.
And so it's like, yeah, and a lot of people, like the basic one is okay, like Mondays are really hard, and then also Fridays you're kind of wiped out, after the thing. But but a lot of people are kind of different on that one, to really realize like, oh, what type of work am I actually engaging with here? How is that overloading me? Are there any patterns I can recognize?
Well, in seasons too. It goes all the way up to seasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I used to do really well coding in the winter, and I couldn't code in the summer. Not that I couldn't, but like,
yeah,
because I want to go outside.
Right.
Like the summer in New England is awesome. If you're in the Northeast in the summer, it's great. Like, why would you? I was constantly trying to figure out how to do all the work I needed to do and make enough money to just work 4 winter months and then enjoy spring, summer, and fall in New England.
Yeah.
Like, that was a big thing I tried for decades. It's like a stupid mistake. I mean, largely with consulting too, like I really was not working 12 months a year most years. And there were years when I did, certainly, but I didn't have to, so I didn't. I would just weeks and weeks off. It wasn't as big a deal.
But yeah, it's so important to get that rest in and to really not use up your capacity, because so there's a guy that I really like, this guy, and I haven't caught up with him in a while. But his overall condition is just like overloaded, just like actually all the time. And he's like an older guy at this point. And he was a prison guard at one point. Not how I met him. And he, but the guy is also a single father of 10. And all.
What?
Yeah. So it was a thing where it was like his wife from way back, like they took some sort of experimental medication or something like that, and then wound up having quintuplets. So that, and then I think there might have been some situations where some of the other children were adopted, but not necessarily from a thing of like, oh, we'd like to have a bigger family, but kind of like, okay, this kid needs a home type of thing.
Right.
And so like he really tried, but this is a guy that he was raising those kids. And there was one year when he was working at this prison where he actually never had one day off. So he actually worked 365 days at a prison raising 10 children by himself.
What?
Yeah. Now, whether or not like all of them turned out okay, or if he's okay, or any of those things, but like he really tried. But that's also an example of, here's a guy who he is trying to be the low entropy reservoir and has no other low entropy reservoirs around him. And I was talking to a friend of mine about this, that she's a substitute teacher and a mom of 2, and kind of trying to hold a lot of stuff together. And she talks about, some of these other people that she works with are rude and all these other things. Conditions are improving because she's relocating to a place that's close to home, and that's all good. So she's got some really good stuff going on. But for a while, like, she was dealing with some serious stuff. And I told her today, I was like, it's like if you have if you're just like a gardener in charge of an enormous field and stuff, where it's just like, you also need to kind of like have a home to go back to, and like opportunities for rest, because every single thing that you're improving is also incurring a cost, and like you're paying that cost. So there needs to be something else that's also kind of offsetting that cost, whether it's another human being or if it's, like not for use, but that they actually want to do that, like support personnel, to kind of proceduralize that as horribly as I could. But like it's so necessary to have people to lean on. You need
Right.
that stick with the big rubber band or whatever to be able to say, okay, yeah, like I'm not gonna just like limp over on the sidewalk here.
Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah, and I think this kind of segues us into. I do want to do a recorded video on this, but I do want to do more on cognitive capacity.
Yeah.
Right, because this is a way that you mitigate sort of overcapacity on the cognitive level, and I'm going to stick by my decision to do cognitive load before cognitive capacity on purpose.
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot of this is just I'm trying to read an audience that isn't always the best at telling me things, and then the people that do, like you get over signaled, so
Yeah.
it's always tricky to kind of figure out what people need to hear. But I'm glad I'm getting the engagement that I'm getting. But on that note, I think we should wrap it up. So what do you want to say for closing comments there, sir?
So I have just a few notes, and I'll kind of pack them in just a little bit. So
you don't have to. You can take your time. We're not
okay.
We're not in a super hurry.
All right. Well, just a few things, because I doubt it'll actually take that much time.
Now we're never gonna get out of here.
Another hour.
That's
No.
Okay. That's okay.
Well, I was looking at Michelle's. I wasn't even talking about Jesse. I was talking about Michelle's question.
Let me read. Yeah, you can't see Jesse. Only I could see Jesse sneaking in. Michelle, thank you, sir. How might incremental improvement assist those uncertain about which job to pursue in identifying their strengths, and what challenges could hinder their progress in a knowledge-driven world? You mean the age of gnosis, sir? The age of gnosis that we find ourselves in? Yeah, I guess we'll let everybody answer this. I'm glad Jesse showed up, because I was kind of like, what? Only 2.5 hour stream? That's all I'm going to get out of this? But now we can go forever. Yeah, look, I mean, again, I like what Bruce said about this topic, right? Which is, exactly what I said. No one knows what the hell they're good at. Like you never knew you could walk when you were a baby. Like you just kind of tried it, right? Like this is why I've struggled with these concepts. I'm like, how does everybody not know this? It's like nobody knows they were babies. Nobody understands when they were young. Nobody remembers anything about their lives, or you can't look out in the world and see that happen, or you can't even infer it just from like thinking about it for 10 minutes. It's like, fair, I get it. That definitely seems to have happened. I feel bad for all of you, but like, yeah, I mean, you have to try to do things and do them incrementally, slowly, with long time frames, maybe weeks, maybe months, maybe years, right? Especially for musicians. I took a cab ride once with somebody. He was the cab driver. And we got to talking about music. And I'm always bugging people about guitar because I've always wanted to play the damn guitar. And apparently I'm a bassist, so I can't. But we'll find that out later, maybe. I'm told reliably now by 2 musicians, oh no, you're obviously a bassist. And I'm like, I don't know what you're seeing in the world. But since I see things in the world no one else does, I assume you're right, because I don't know why I can't play the damn guitar. But he said he can teach anybody guitar, which I think is false, whatever, but it takes a year. And I was like, oh man. And the problem for me is nothing has ever taken me a year in my life. So I can't even imagine. I'm like, nah. I ain't doing nothing for a year. Screw that. Like, not happening. Because I'm just naturally fast. But like the way you learn is by, trying over and over again. I can't even imagine practicing guitar every day for a year. Like that to me is the most insane idea ever. But the problem is I'm naturally competent at all kinds of things, and I can just pick things up, and people are like, have you done that before? And I'm like, no, not really. And they're like, what? And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I just do things and they usually work out. And I don't know, everybody isn't like that, because my parents told me I was normal like everybody else, and that was a wicked lie. So So, but the way you know is by doing things. And there's a bunch of things I've tried to do, like play guitar and draw, that I can't do. Like I just can't do them. And that's how I learned. I kept trying and trying and trying, and then I was like, "Hey, this isn't working. Maybe this isn't something that I can do." And other people can do. I'd watch other people draw, and I'm like, "Wow, that's awesome." And then I'd be like, "Oh yeah, I can totally do that." And then I just can't. And I just can't. Like, and but it goes the other way too. Like I write really well, and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, you just do this," and I can just gin up stories like that. It's not a problem for me. Um, and other people can't, and I'm always like, "But you just do the thing. Like, what? Why is this? I don't understand." And then they want to know how I do it, and I'm like, "What do you mean how do I? You just do it. Like, there's no how. You just fun. Like it's fun. Story. Like bang. Like I don't." So, but most people, including myself, you have to try things over and over again, to see how much better you can get at them. And then if you can't get better, don't, stop immediately, like reset and see if you need different sets of skills or you can learn it a different way or whatever. Um, Eddie Van Halen, right, came up with a new way to play guitar because he wasn't trained in how to play guitar. So he actually uses the guitar differently from every other human. And some people can learn guitar that way, and some people can't play the guitar that way, right? Like there's little things like that all over the place, and that's pretty much everywhere. And so you got to keep trying, right? But at a certain point, you also have to give up because you can't do it, right? So it's all about persistence, and the thing that trains persistence is incremental improvement, right? They're reciprocal in that way. They're like, oh, incremental improvement helps me to train my persistence, and persistence helps me to figure out what I'm good at, right? Through incremental improvement, right? And when you're not making it anymore, you're not making it. And you can't focus on knowledge because what is the knowledge of how to play guitar, right? That's the I don't know what that would mean. Right. Because I've seen people, and I myself can play chords or could play chords, and I could switch between chords. I never got good at that because that just requires 365 days of practicing every day. Inconceivable. It's like I can't do that. So I could switch between chords, and I still couldn't play guitar. So I knew how to play guitar. I know all the components you need to play guitar for sure. All of them. I've tried 3 or 4 different learn to play guitar, methods, at least, right? And I just can't do it. Like I just can't. But I've tried 3 or 4 different ways, and I've tried individual improvement. I worked with one guy once. It's a big black guy. He was really nice, the sweetest guy you ever met. Huge though. It's just a large human. And I train people wherever I am because I'm really good at things and I'm really good at communicating them. And so certain things anyway. And so he was like, "Oh, I want to train you to do something." And he's like, "I play guitar." And I'm like, "Well, I'd love to learn guitar." And so he'd give me chords to play. And he's actually the one that taught me how to switch chords. Not by having a guitar and showing me either, which is weird. He just basically said, no, you do this. Like, just learn these patterns. I forget which ones. D, E, C, and something. There were 4 of them. I don't remember the 4th one. But he said, you learn these 4 basic chords. And then after you've got them down, and he told me how to get them down. He gave me all the knowledge propositionally. And it actually worked. That's the funny part. Like, it actually worked. And so I was able to do all that. He said, all right, now just switch between these 2 and then switch between these 2 and then learn to switch between these 2 and then switch between these 2 this way and these 2 this, right? And so I actually got to the point where I could do that. The problem was I couldn't add in the timing because I just can't learn guitar. There's way too many, and I can tell you all the pieces. I can just list them for you and stuff. And I can tell you how they need to go together and all that. And I still cannot play guitar. So it is what it is.
If I was teaching guitar, I would never teach chords first. I teach power chords, aka the smallest amount of movement for the maximum amount of potential in playing along to something. For me, learning an instrument and being a musician is as much about confidence as it is about the music itself, i.e., how confident or how competent can you get that continues the feedback mechanism of continuing the incremental complexity of each layer of being a skilled technician to make it more broad. So you kind of want to have you want to be able to do something enough of the technique of playing guitar or being a musician that gets you to do as much as possible, and then you build on that because you know that you can do that. Versus you go chords, you have to have muscle dexterity, you have to have timing, switching, the knowledge, and also, I guess, the ability to repeat those mundane things of being able to go da 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 da.
Yeah, most music is boring, rote, repetition. Yeah. I wanna highlight this. Ethan, important to remember that, quote, exceptions aren't invested or sought after. They just happen. That's true, right? It is devastating how much people miss this. Yeah, I agree. Like, yeah, people don't like exceptions happen, so they're not interesting in some sense. What's interesting is the ability to be consistent. It's the ability to do this repetition, this rote, sort of boring stuff. Like, that's what's exceptional in the world, because that's not normal to to the universe. Like, it's not, the universe is generally chaos.
Can we go back to Michelle's question? I was reflecting on that, and what came to me is a part of being an adult, and I'm going to talk symbolically here, is learning to kill the teenager. Right? If you stay and if you keep the spirit of being a teenager alive, you end up becoming a zombie, essentially, symbolically speaking. This thing of not wanting to do the tough things or not wanting to give up complete, we're wanting to maintain complete individual, so, like, wanting to be completely an individual, but also wanting to be completely a group and not wanting to actually being an adult is learning how to mediate between those two extremes in some sense of there are moments where you need to make a decision and then there are moments where you need to conform to certain processes or groups or etc. But yeah, you see that sort of teenager thing has been now amplified almost infinitely into maybe 2 generations now, where they're refusing to accept the hard facts would be one way of moralizing it, but you could say it a number of different ways. But yeah, that's how my incremental assist those uncertain about which job to pursue is actually realizing, well, these things that you thought as a teenager were what you thought as a teenager. You can't continue to identify with those thinking patterns back then. But that's precisely against the normal now, which is that, oh, you made those decisions to study that university degree when you were 17 and dumb, not when you're 25 and had some wits and some actual life experience, because you're held back from getting life experience because you're taught that you have to learn from books and whatever else. Feminized education system, just as much, which has affected not just men, but it's also affected women.
Right.
There was something else about the end of his question as well, which was the identifying. Yeah. So as a teenager, you tend to amplify what you think you're good at versus what you are actually good at, and kind of going against that extreme, which is the rebellion.
Yeah, you're desire oriented. And this, this goes to, and this is probably a topic for a future stream, right, which is the maturity crisis. Because we definitely have that. And yeah, how do we fight that? And a lot of that, I think, correctly, is this idea that we're not burning off the dead wood, right? We're not understanding that to come into adulthood is to become consistent, because teenagers are all over the place, and we've
Chaotic.
exemplified. Right, right. Well, and they should be, right? Because they're experimenting. And that's what you should do as a teenager. But like we've exemplified this idea of being a teenager forever, or being in that state forever, through movies like Dark City and The Crow and The Matrix. It's all right there. The Matrix is very much a teenage fantasy movie. And the interesting thing is, one of the reasons why it's hard to identify who the hero is in that movie, because there's 4 contenders, right, of equal weight, actually, is because you don't understand the hierarchy, and it's actually a deeper than normal hierarchy in the Matrix, right? Because you've got the Oracle, you've got the person chosen by the Oracle to find the one, then you've got the one, and you've got the one before they're the one, and the one after they're the one, and then you've got the validator who validates the one. And it's like, and it's crazy. Like there's all this weird, unintentional, obviously, symbolism in that movie that just emerges as the result of writing a good story. And I think that's, if you manage to write a good story, all this stuff is going to be in there, because you have to have it to be a good story. And people don't understand that. They think they can just deconstruct and break down a story and go, well, a good story has these. You can't do that. Like, that's absurd. And that's where the problem comes in.
For me, the validation aspect, and thank God that I've finally gotten to this place in my life. 36 in 2 days' time, but it's taken me about 5 years to shake off that sense of needing validation.
Right.
Which is a huge thing, which is the TikTok crisis, the competency crisis, intimacy crisis. It's all about needing some external validation, or approval would be another way of saying it, or even more darkly, the sense of tolerance of, hey, a second, I'm validating myself, so you should be tolerant of.
Right, not getting your validation from the right place. Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying.
All of your validation can't be, we'll say, external other people, right, or a degree conveyed by a college, because that won't do it. And then people go, well, there's this whole phenomena in society, this whole fake it till you make it thing, right? This whole idea that that you feel like an imposter. And I first heard that, I'm like, oh my goodness, what's wrong with these poor people? I've never had anything like that in my life. What is wrong with them? But there is something wrong with them. And it's terrifying, right? It's absolutely horrifying. And it's sad. And it's really concerning. But they don't understand incremental improvement. They're just going through the motions at a very high level. They didn't learn the individual components. They never learned them. And so they are faking it. They are LARPing at some point, because they weren't taught the right things in the right order over the right amount of time. Now, you can't teach somebody to program in a 3-week boot camp. People have tried, and there are people out there in the industry doing it, and they're just horrible programmers, and no one realizes it.
So I'd like to respond to Michelle's question as well. And yeah, that way we could spend
Whose stream is this?
Michelle's, apparently. He paid for it. But thank you, Michelle. I won't see a dime. But I wanted to. There's a few of these things that you guys were talking about that I think synthesize really well for Michelle's questions. So some of these things, for sure, you're going to wind up coming to a point where, even if you're persistent, which is extremely important factor, you're probably going to run into, and we talked about this before, like needing a break out of a frame for scaling and that type of thing. Sometimes you can't be the person to actually do that. And sometimes you need to rely, like, say, if you're working on a project or something like that, you might come to the point, you describe like the guy that has to, that's trying to make a video game on his own and also have it as successful. There's going to come a point where you reach a limit where you actually can't do whatever that function is. And you're going to need to have a specialist or a black swan or something like that show up. And like I've personally experienced that in a lot of things where, like to your point about, oh gosh, I have to do the guitar every day for a year. Like there's stuff that I worked on, like it's the same for me. Like if I know that something's not going to work, then okay, I'll drop it. Like I'm not just going to like flip flop because it didn't work a few times, but like I'll really drill to the bottom of something until it happens. And like I have forced things to happen many times that it's just like, oh, I didn't have the expertise for this or the skills or like still don't, but like this is going to happen and I'm just going to ram my way through it. And I remember there was a point that I reached actually earlier this year where I was reflecting with someone. I said, look, I have actually never spent even a quarter the amount of time that I've spent on this particular thing, and I have made no headway, like actually none. And I was like, this is actually, like, I have never had this experience. I have never had something that I couldn't eventually get done or figure out some way around it or something like that. I never actually done it. And then I was like, within a couple of months, actually, somebody else just did it. Like actually, like just did it for me. And I was like, oh, like I actually didn't have to do that the whole time. And now I can continue on. Like the frame is broken, new frame, room to grow and everything. It's like, oh, okay, now I can get back to work. I never had to do that thing. But there was some obstacle that somebody else who was specialized could actually go and do it. And I was like, oh, that's actually important to know. So that, and then just kind of this thing of being patient with yourself. That's and also if you're fostering the incremental improvement for others, being patient with them, like with the music thing, that it might be necessary. And we've talked about this briefly before, like the difference between patience and negligence. That the patience, you have a telos in mind. Negligence is just like, okay, this guy's fumbling around, like whatever, who cares? But if you're teaching someone how to play like the keyboard or something like that, that maybe you don't get on them every single time they mess up a note, because it's more important to learn how to do it continuously than to have to like, oh gosh, I screwed that one up, let me start over again. It's like, no, you keep playing. Like just that's the bigger
you play past your errors, right? Because your goal is not perfection in the moment. Your goal is to be able to incrementally improve. And you can't incrementally improve if you're not making mistakes or you're correcting your mistakes as you go. Exactly. So that's actually not the best thing to do all the time.
Yeah.
Particularly for drummers. Drummers who are basically trying to these days mimic machines, which is a very strange, I don't know, sidetracking, but yeah, there's that sense too of playing the instrument versus being the instrument is also another part of the incremental process, because you want to get beyond mere repetition and processing to the fact that you're resonating something or you're fulfilling a purpose. So you do all this root work to get to the point where it's not even consequential that you did that. That's just kind of, it just becomes, essentially muscle building. Yeah.
Right. Well, it was interesting too, because this week, oddly enough, Sarah's got 2 keyboards. So there's 2 keyboards in the house now. And, they're really high-end professional. She was in a band, and she's classically trained. So she knows what she's doing. And so these 2 keyboards in my living room. And I was like, well, let's see if I can play Do Re Mi, because I keep telling everybody I can. And it's been a while since I walked over to a keyboard. And boy, I couldn't get the ending right. I was like, what is going on? I just couldn't do it anymore. I'm like, I had the muscle memory down. I didn't need to think about this. Right. And so I go to the end and screw it up. And usually what would happen is I would try to finish it and just I couldn't. So then I have to start over again, and because I got to do the whole sequence, and then eventually I fixed it. She couldn't fix it. I was like, well, how come you don't even know this? And she's like, I don't even know what this is from. And I'm like, it's the damn scales. How do you not know this? Guy was making fun of her hard. It's like, what? You don't even know the scales. How can you even play these instruments? But it's from Sound of Music, I guess. Apparently, I don't know when or how I learned it. I just learned it when I was young and held on to it for dear life because I was like, I could play one thing on one instrument. Ha! I win. Good enough.
The paradox too is either focusing on the problem or focusing on the resolution. So you can go, okay, I'll just practice or just focus on what I'm not good at and hope to improve that, or I do so at the cost of burning up my emotional and physical capacity by just focusing on what I'm not good at.
Well,
So
and
being an
all
adult
the
was
other
learning
things
the
you're
life
excluding. Yeah, but
Yeah.
you're excluding a bunch of things too. Like that's the people always miss that part. And yeah, to Castle's point too, like there's a lot of times, and if you just cooperate, the barrier will be done for you, and you don't need to, like, you can rely on other people. Like that's actually a good thing to do. That's all the successful people I know rely on other people for their specialties. They don't try to do everything themselves, and the ones that do aren't successful ever. I've never met a successful person who can do that. I've met people who were I met a lot of people who were successful when they had a partner, and when whatever reason they split up with their partner, ever since then they've been burning through everything. Because that happens a lot to people. So you need a partner. But let me read this, Ethan. You can't quote know, end quote, these things that make a good story because their intelligence is ontologically superior to yours. That's a really good point. I hate Ethan. He comes up with really good points. I don't know why I don't think of them. Like what you were saying about walking, I think. Yeah, exactly. Right. There are unknown unknowns and there are known unknowns, which are things that you know about, but you can't know. So that's people miss that part of it. It's not known unknowns and you can know about them. There's known unknowns that you can never understand, but you know they exist. And so obviously at some point there was quote nothing and then there was something. That's creation. You know about it, but you can't know it in any real sense. And you also don't need to because you're living in it. So it's not that important. Right? You can know of something about it, but you can't know it. And it's the same way with what makes a good story. Stories are bigger than individual people. An individual person is not going to know what makes a good story ever. They might know some components of a good story, but they're not going to know the whole thing. That's the quote postmodern critique. This author didn't understand what they were writing. Well, they didn't understand everything they were writing, but they probably understood what they were writing. And it just means that the postmoderns, everything they say is actually wrong, and I can prove it. Fight me, bro. I'll win that every time. I've been winning it for decades. I'll continue to win that battle. No good comes out of the postmodern philosophers and their reprehensible sayings.
I was thinking with respect to the story thing. So I had just finished The Fellowship of the Ring for the first time, and there's a foreword by Tolkien where he goes, and I mean, like, I was aware of it, but I had never gotten for it myself. And what a treat. I'm glad I waited. Also, I was robbed. But, even like that's kind of, I've been having that feeling a lot. It's like, wow, I missed out on so much, but also glad I have it now. But he has this thing where he has this little foreword, and he's talking about he actually says that he dislikes he says something like, I cordially dislike allegory. And so he says that he's like, and I was thinking about that because allegory literally means like to speak past, and like you're like past your audience even. And he says that allegory is the purpose domination of the author. And I was thinking, like, it's very much a high barrier to entry, but also you're like set within the bounds that are there. Versus, he says, applicability is something that's often mistaken for allegory, or the other way around. And that's like to kind of to fold in or to weave in, and that it gives the freedom of the reader, and that there's a much lower barrier to entry in that. And I was thinking about this with respect to the to incremental improvement, because if you get the applicability, like, you can put that to use. Like, if I tell a story and, like, I relate something that happened to me, or even in the Lord of the Rings or something like that, and I can tell you, like, oh, this is what happened and all that stuff, and like that's applicable. But then if I give an allegory of it, like, that requires ears to hear. And I wonder, like, I was thinking of that show Kung Fu with David Carradine.
Yes, excellent
It's really
show.
good. I'm
Everybody should
on a
watch
really
that show.
I'm in a really slow crawl, but I think I'm in like season 3 or 4 or something like that. And absolutely amazing. But there's that thing where you see like, oh, Kane hears a story from his master, and then it becomes irrelevant like 30 or 40 years later. And it's like that is extremely small incremental improvement
Right.
that he's experiencing, also important, but also you can't use, like, he wasn't able to apply it for 30 years, you know, and it's like there's trade-offs for that.
Right. No, everybody should watch that show. That's one of the
It's so
greatest TV
good.
shows. Also that show concept was originally come up with by Bruce Lee. Like
Yeah,
he's the
I remember.
originator of that show concept, and they stole it from him because they're a bunch of Hollywood scumbags. But also they implemented it really, really well.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that he would have implemented it as well. I don't know.
And the family got paid, right? So
Maybe. Well, and it's one of those things like maybe the cooperation was correct, even though he wanted to do the whole thing himself.
it's better if there's consent, but
Yeah, it's always hard to know with these things. I haven't seen, although I have it, I haven't seen Warrior yet, which is supposed to be the pure vision of that.
I tried some. Have you ever heard about a show called Spartacus?
Heard of it.
Let's just say you take the teenage rebellion, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and you take that, you put that in the Roman context with some gladiators. That's what you get with Spartacus. And they're like, hey, a lot of people liked this amplified, use nice ways to say this, amplified storytelling, which means, you know, every 7 to 12 to 18 minutes, something explicit needs to happen in order to carry forth the spirit of excess. That's Warrior. So
right.
Once you see that pattern, you're like, okay, oh yeah, it's getting a bit boring, okay, that's an excessive violence scene. How do we get to that? Is okay, well, be some the drama, you know, the tension and pull between drama and action. Yeah.
Well, and that's the Jesse, that's what's missing from The Beekeeper. There's no drama in that movie. None.
Yeah.
Like actually zero. It's in some ways it's the most remarkable film because there's no drama.
So bad. I can't believe.
Well, no. You're gonna get see the thing. No. I figured out what it is. The beginning is very banal and boring and Michael Bay, but actually, as it goes on and the social commentary is revealed, because he does this whole unfolding thing with it. I'm not saying he does a good job of it. The movie's, in many ways, the movie's both really good and really terrible because he's stuck in the flat world. But like he tries to do this unfolding with this kind of surprise shock third act, in essence. And so by the time you get to the third act, the whole story becomes clear. Like all the social commentary makes more sense. But like there's a great scene in there too, for example, where he basically you know, and it's totally gratuitous and unnecessary and would never happen this way, which is even funnier. He walks up to the FBI SWAT team or whatever's going on, and he basically starts telling them, no, you need to smoke these guys out of the building, right? Because he's a beekeeper, so everything's in beekeeping terms. It's awesome. So that part was awesome. I'm like, this is great. but he then basically beats up half the SWAT team by himself and goes into the building. But in the middle of talking to them, before he starts beating them up, he says, listen, you know, they have to be smoked out. There's going to be a few innocent people lost, but that's how these things go. And I'm just like, pragmatism for the win. Like, yes, you calculate casualties first, because you can't make a good decision about what to do if you don't calculate the casualties. And you also can't know if you're a retard if you don't calculate casualties and then see if you've hit your mark or you've gone way over or way under. Like, you got to know, right? So you always calculate casualties first. And I want to take a comment, and I want to make another comment, and then I'll open it back up again. Ethan, Van Halen didn't know his expertise until after it was revealed to him. Yeah, he had no idea he was playing the guitar completely wrong, like a complete stupid person. Knowledge comes after the fact, right? It's a consequence of, not a cause of. Well said. I'm banning Ethan from my Discord and my future chats. Yeah, and I want to point out too, this one way to think about, the competency crisis, the problems that we have today, the ideological possession or entrapment, or however you want to think about it. You can use a very simple frame for this. I'm not necessarily recommending this, but it is useful, is to say, yeah, a lot of people are just trapped in the teenage fantasy and have never matured. And you just see that everywhere, right? Like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC. Like, just listen to her talk. She talks like a freaking 12-year-old about the world, right? Greta Thunberg talks like right? And they're being lifted up. And if you look in media, the lifting up of young people as heroes in rebellion against the older people is a big theme. Why is that? We know we have a crisis, and we know we're all children, and we need children to save the world because that's all we got. Like, this is not actually a bad way to think about the problem. It's the maturity crisis. People haven't matured. We've got a bunch of teenagers running around, running Fortune 500 companies, mostly into the ground, by the way. And it's a big problem because they never understood what they were doing. They were LARPing. It was imposter syndrome. And now we have a problem. And we didn't educate them correctly, for sure, or even at all, because we don't even understand what education is. See my videos, because I understand what education is. So there you go. It's been a big problem all along. And because we focused on knowledge, and knowledge is very high up the stack. Below knowledge is information, and below information are signals. And you need to understand that. Otherwise, you'll focus on the knowledge and trying to have it, instead of focusing on doing things and thereby learning things. Thank you. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. But I figured that would resonate with you, Jesse, because you've probably seen the teenagers in media and children heroes in media problem for decades now.
Yeah, there's another layer to that, which is that the vampiric nature of both raising up, but also controlling as you raise up, or what's essentially containment. So we want you to boost us, the people that are still maintaining these flawed, corrupt systems. We want to boost up and amplify you, but then actually take away your efforts or take away your values, because it works.
It's not that they want to. It's that you don't understand how this works. If you boost somebody up, you take away, like, the two go together and they can't be separated.
Yeah.
But we live in this scientific world where we think we can arbitrarily cut up the world and separate things however we like. And that it just turns out that that's not true. And we don't have a sense for that because we don't know what incremental improvement is. So we don't know how things build together and how they can't be built together. So it may well be that certain people need to learn power chords first and not regular chords. I don't know. Right now, and the thing is, it's not consistent. Most things aren't consistent. Some people, the way they need to learn programming is different from other people, right? The way I learn almost everything is completely different from the way most people learn those same things. It just is what it is, and we don't account for that. And then we get into this discussion about things like, well, the education system needs to do this. It's like, it doesn't matter what education system improvement you put in place. You're going to leave behind some number of people. And so what you want to do is you want to minimize that error. And we actually have those numbers. Like, we know what does that best. And it turns out that making the other people suffer is better for them. They complain about it afterwards. I get that. But that's because they're not burning off the deadwood of their teenage years and learning, oh, this is a horrible experience, but it actually made me better. And therefore I should be happy about it and not pissed off all the time.
What I was trying to say is that the vampiric nature is also an incremental aspect, where it's we want to continue to be youthful, but also will continue to take out life force, maybe to use a big broad term.
Well, you have to be youthful.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
two
well,
are the same. It's the same move.
Yeah, and then it's a
They're
false
not-
construct too. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not differentiable. I mean, the good news is you'll be happy to know that science has in fact discovered that if you put young blood from young mice into older mice, they actually do go backwards in age. The bad news is everybody already knew this for real. There's a famous woman who's one of the inspirations for the vampire legend. It's not just Vlad the Impaler, who actually used to kill her young servants and bathe in their blood because she thought it would make her younger. So, like, even the medievals knew this. This isn't new news. Also, stem cells and cord blood and stuff were known about before those mice experiments were done. But I guess science had to do the stupid experiment because science is retarded, and it wasn't always retarded. But I think the low hanging fruit for science has been plucked, guys. So I think it's all downhill. It's been downhill for a while, and it's all downhill now. Like, I'm sorry. But yeah, I think one of the problems is people are busy. Instead of making things better or trying to make good people better, they're trying to make bad people better. And so their efforts are misplaced. And that's lowering the world. It's flattening the world. It's equalizing the world. But you can't do that. When you raise somebody up from below, in order to raise them up, you have to be in a position above them anyway. And so you're lying about that. And then if they're not ready, if they don't have the skills for that, they're under your control. And if you don't take responsibility for that, you're placing them under the random control of random agents. It's not that they're not gaining autonomy because you lifted them up. That didn't happen. So that's a big problem, especially if you lift them up too quickly, which you almost certainly do because you don't understand incremental improvement. And so now you've created a problem that didn't need to be there. And that to some extent is, it's interesting because that theme, if you look hard enough, is actually in The Beekeeper to some extent, right? He's being bad guy's being overly protected. And then he's basically making more bad people. It is hysterically funny. The end especially is such a great social commentary. Like, on the other hand, it's wrong, but like, it's not wrong enough that I'm worried about it. It's just like, if you understood the enchanted world, because everything, like, the beekeepers are outside of everything else. And it's just like, you guys just keep doing this trick. We're like, I don't know, we've got the government and the CIA and all this, and then there's the beekeepers. And it's like, what? Like, what are you doing? Why do you think this is gonna work?
Yeah.
But it is a fun movie, if nothing else. It reminded me a lot of Man on Fire because it's a do the right thing movie. It's not, we'll say as ultra violent fun as that is. It is ultra violent in a different way, though. Like, there's a lot of shooting and a lot of silliness. And the hero does get wounded, which is nice. I like that. I don't like invincible hero bullshit. That drives me nuts. There's always a cost to conflict. Always.
Although Commando was really good. I don't know. That movie was pretty excellent.
Commando, maybe ever. I don't know.
Really?
If I have, it's been a long time.
The interesting thing about those 80s movies, Castle, is that they're the most overtly masculine.
Yeah.
Made in the most feminine age.
Yeah.
In the most feminine, corrupt age. So it's kind of like this
contrast.
They're actually filling a vacuum, and everyone's looking to the vacuum as like, although this is true, amplified. Yeah, this is what we need. It's like, no, it's actually the complete reverse. You've
Yeah.
lost masculinity, so now you're hyping it up into this
Right.
It-
almost unattainable state of,
Right.
Yeah.
predator
over-
or commander.
You're over signaling it because you're not exemplifying it correctly. Right.
Yeah.
And then all these new Gen X's or Gen X's that are now have start to have some power and influence are going, oh no, we need to get back to the 80s. We need to get, I'm like, get back to the line. Like, no one's able to consume that much protein and have that much time to build that much muscle to go save the world. Like, you're going to do one or the other.
Right.
Yeah.
What's interesting too, I mean, I don't know if you've ever engaged with any of the sort of stories of that little crew of bodybuilders that became famous, because there's a bunch of them, right? Schwarzenegger was just like, he was the winner of the battle.
Lundgren,
Lundgren,
Stallone. Yeah.
Well, but they all knew each other.
Oh,
'cause
yeah.
They were all in the
Van Damme.
bodybuilding circuit. Right, Van
Van Damme,
Damme.
yeah.
Right, but they were all in the bodybuilding circuit. And then there's another thing going on slightly before that around the karate, and like Bruce Lee, and everybody knows him because he was the outlier there, right? And now the story you hear is the Joe Rogan Comedy Connection story, right? Where all the comedians that came out of the comedy milieu that he talks about are either they have TV shows or they've done things like Joe Rogan, world's greatest podcaster, right? Whatever. There's all that Adam Carolla started the podcasting industry, right? Like, it's like, what? All these weird things that come out of these little niche sort of, markets, extremist markets. There are always extremist markets that are ruling things. They're just not ruling any of the things you think in the way that you understand, because the postmodern top-down power from above narrative is dumb and completely wrong, has nothing to do with the world you live in, and doesn't map to it even a little bit, by the way, which is why everyone's so confused, because they're trying to use this stupid flat world map and it doesn't even fit at all. It's not even a good flat map. It's just terrible and stupid.
Well, yeah, a small, organized, committed crew, let's put it that way, will always achieve some form of results in the world. It's even biblical. You go back to the Bible. You have the Jericho people. It's like,
but it's a filter.
Yeah.
That's the problem. People don't understand filters. The world is made up of filters. When you filter for the top 10%, you get the top 10%. Because nobody likes that answer, because you're not in the fucking top 10%. Like, I'm sorry. And so they don't want that. And I get it. Right. But also, too bad. Like, this is the card you're dealt. So you need to find people you can cooperate with so that doesn't affect you in the way that you don't want it to. I mean, that was my big mistake. Like, I had no resources, man. When they took that house, no resources. When they took all my stuff, everything that my mother owned and that my stepfather owned, I had no resources. I couldn't get anybody to help me. The law is forfeit. Like, there's no justice in the United States at all. There haven't been. I mean, they took my house, first of all, right? And it's the banks. It's not the banks. The federal government basically signaled to the local governments to do this. And the states signaled down to their little districts. And, everybody had this weird exemplification that we should let big banks take assets that they don't want and can't monetize from people who can use them and where they're most valuable. Why would we do that? But we did. That's exactly what happened.
Well, if if the incremental improvement model works, and it does, the reverse is also true, slippery slope, which is that things slowly gain inertia. Everyone's familiar with the avalanche myth, which is that small thing at the top trickles down and it has mass consequences. And so those small, seems like a small decision on the federal government's part becomes this mass chaos, right? And it flows downstream.
Right. And they're trying to fix it, right? They come up with this HARP program and they modify it 4 or 5 times. And the banks, because they didn't understand what they were doing, the banks are like taking houses anyway and denying the federal money, because it wasn't about money. That's not what it was about. So the cash was not all that important to the banks First of all, they have cash. They don't need more. Second of all, that wasn't what the housing crisis was about at all. It was about confidence, which is a way different thing than cash. And so they wanted to resolve it the way they wanted to resolve it because they wanted to hide their fraud, which is way more important to them than having the money. Because if you get caught with fraud, A, you could lose all your money now, but B, you'll definitely lose your money in the future. And they're not stupid. But the people running the government at the time were about the dumbest people that ever walked the earth. So that's what happens when you send somebody to Harvard who isn't capable of being in Harvard, and then you graduate them anyway. Don't do that. This is well documented, by the way, with Harvard in particular, by the way. This experiment has a known outcome. And that particular presidency was the exemplification of what happens when you do that. It's also in the Beekeeper movie, right? Like the corruption, the small corruption at the bottom and just ignoring it over and over again leads to this catastrophic conclusion. And a lot of that is because we don't know how things work. If you think you can just buy off a bank, first of all, you don't understand what a bank is. They have money. You can't buy a bank. That doesn't make any sense. They already have money. They don't need more. They are the thing that has the money, right? They don't operate on money. That's not how they operate. So, and I know that's confusing, but also that's how it works. And so what ends up happening is because you don't know how things are fit together, you try to fix them with stupid ideas. And then the next thing you know, you've got FEMA telling people they can't fly helicopters to save people in an emergency. Like, what is going on here? Right? Like, why are we in this? Well, we are because of all these stupid mistakes and people don't understand what's important. And the idea that the simple, observable, perverse outcome is an indication that you've gone horribly wrong and you need to not do what you're doing has been lost. Like, obviously, if you're telling people or using the FAA to ban airspace or something because a helicopter went through and helped a private citizen on their private property and brought them to public land, the system's corrupt and you need to do something about that immediately. In the meantime, shut the system off for real. Like, no, we're not restricting airspace for the moment. How's that? There's very simple steps you can take. We're not arresting people who have pilot's licenses ever, like until the disaster is over. We're just going to suspend. This is the thing. Nobody likes this answer. Sometimes you have to suspend the laws to get things done and then reinstate them later. But we're very bad at shutting things off temporarily. And so we haven't been doing it. And fair enough. But also, we need to do that. Right. And people will point, we had 9/11 and we never got rid of the terrorism stuff. And it's like, well, that's true, but we could fix that by getting rid of it instead of tearing down the whole government. Like that would be one solution. And people think we're not doing it. We can do things temporarily. We can. And if you had incremental improvement training, you'd know that.
My final thought would be that I hope Alex is doing well from last week, and I hope he watches the stream because
Me too.
in some ways this stream is very tailor made to his challenges, and as well as the challenges that we all face, which is that if we want results, as Marcus just talked about, if you want to see a tree planted, you're gonna have to dig some dirt. You're gonna have to do the hard work. You're gonna have to plant seeds. You're gonna have to wait. You're gonna have to water. You're gonna have to let sun shine. And you're gonna have to pray the thing actually survives the process. So, true for nature. It's true for us. So.
Oh yeah, we can look to nature and learn these things. Sure. Castle, what you got?
Well, I definitely want to echo the bit about Alex. I hope he's doing well. I can. There was a time in my life where I could really relate with Alex as well. So that is something that you can reach through incremental improvement. Like you can absolutely get out of any sort of situation like that and everything. So, and I mean, I saw last week's stream, and I saw that it's like, here's a guy with potential he's just not sure where to go. Like Michelle's a question where it's like, what if you don't know what you're supposed to be doing? And it's like, well, you engage the arduous, you accept the fact that you're going to fail, and there isn't shame in that or anything. And there may even come a time where you'll improve to the point where you can look back and even be grateful for those failures because they provided you with good contrast and with good, negative feedback to know what you should and shouldn't be focusing on. And to also, I think this might be a little bit of like a cognitive load thing, but I remember from Manuel's video with Ahmad that Ahmad had this thing where he was talking about getting into the frame of creativity. And then we had talked about kind of like the nonlinear scaling that Ahmad will go and he'll sometimes think of like turning whatever he wanted to do a project of into like a Yu-Gi-Oh card, because that was a game that he played when he was young. And that he would imagine, oh, what if I made a Yu-Gi-Oh card out of this? But by doing a tiny little thing, that he was able to then get into the frame of mind of being creative. And that's kind of, I would relate that a little bit to Mark's litmus test type things that you would do if you knew if you could do like AI work on a given day. If you couldn't even do the Yu-Gi-Oh card, like if he couldn't do that, then it's not a creativity day. So you can kind of, look into that stuff. And then also just the fact of, do you actually want to improve? And two quick little things, from saints. There's Saint Thomas Aquinas got a letter from his sister, and his sister asked, "What do I have to do to become a saint?" And he said, "You have to want it." Like that's it's like you have to actually. What that doesn't mean. Oh well, I want it, and therefore, oh nice, I'm a saint. But it's like, did you actually want it? And then Saint
That
Teresa
comes first. Yeah,
right. And Saint Teresa of Avila says, that if you actually focused on, like specifically in the spiritual life, if you wanted to not sin anymore, if you actually just focus on incrementally cleaning up and burning off all that dead wood, that within just a few years you could actually stop. And this isn't Pelagianism. It's not like there's a, what do you say? It assumes a primordial presupposition on that one, but to enrage Mark for a second, but that there is something that even precedes the want. And so if you've got the want, then that means that also there is something primordial that's presupposing that. And that, it's too much fun. I'm sorry. But yeah, that if you can want it, then kind of make that decision that you're actually you are going to improve. And then like the failures will actually become, in a sense, maybe even you might even delight in failed attempts because you know that you're on that way. Like if you did one skill and then you're on another skill, that you'll know, oh, this is all part of the process, and you could even delight in the process at that point. But those are
well, I used to tell people that I don't understand the word failure and it doesn't exist. Because every time I quote failed, I learned, and therefore I didn't fail, sort of thing. Yeah, a lot of people have that format. Did we go through all your notes, Castle, or I don't want to?
I think that was everything I had.
Oh, okay. I didn't want to rush you or anything, but yeah,
no,
good. Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure you got in everything you needed to get in. Yeah, it was good to see Bruce. I'm glad Jesse dropped in at the last minute, even though he was late. Artistic people suck. They're always late. And Castle, thank you. And yeah, look, I hope Alex is doing well. I hope that Tom, who requested this, gets what he needs out of this. And if he doesn't, hopefully he'll let me know. He's pretty good about that, actually. He's good at giving feedback. And look, I mean, in some sense, it's bad news. You can't do all the things you want to do. But you should figure out what you can do or what you want to do most and see if you can do it through incremental improvement. And if not, don't waste your time on it anymore. Move to something else and really focus on one or two things or three things to be good at. And don't try to be good at everything. A lot of people, like, oh, I'm going to be good at music and I'm going to be good at programming. And no, you're not. Like, this is not going to happen. You need to slow your roll a bit. And the thing is, if you do that, you can be good at lots of things, right? Over time. Like I can sail, I can fix cars, like really well, actually. right? I can program in 8 programming languages, and I can do DevOps work, which is totally different, right? And I can do YouTube stuff, right? And so many more things, right? I know how to cook. I'm actually a pretty good cook. There's all kinds of things that I know how to cut down trees. Like I learned all that over many, many, many years and incremental improvement, right? And learning from other people and learning by doing. And that's the thing. Like, you only ever learn anything by doing. You never learn anything by reading a book or listening to a podcast ever. You think you did, but you actually didn't. And then you end up like John Vervaeke using a term like primordial presuppositions without even knowing where that came from. I know exactly where that comes from, by the way. It comes from exactly one place. And he doesn't, I guarantee you, or he wouldn't have used it for sure. And yeah, I mean, people get ridiculous with their use of things because they think they have knowledge. And knowledge is not something you can have. It's revealed through your participation. That's it. And if it's revealed through your participation, be grateful because it's not revealed to everyone equally through their participation. So that's what you need to know. And you need to try things and don't just give up when they fail, but like try a couple different times or whatever, and then give up and try something else because you're just not going to be good at everything. And that's okay. That just makes you like everybody else. So have a good week, everybody. I don't know what the next week's live stream topic's going to be. I might get a suggestion on the Discord server like we did this time, or I'll pick something from my list. Now we've got maturity crisis added in. Yeah, I have parts 2 and 3 recorded of the commentary. There's another commentary I want to work on as well with Jordan Peterson. I have a new slide. I want to do that slide. There's probably still 200 plus topics in my video topics list. So if I get motivated and I can actually do stuff and I don't like apparently eat things that used to be okay for me and now make me sick, hopefully I can get that done here while I don't know if I have more time or less. On the one hand, I've been left with a bunch of frozen food I can just heat up and eat. On the other hand, it's still way more time for me to make my own food than it is to be called to dinner. So I don't know. There's a bunch of stuff I have to do. So we'll see. Maybe I'll get more videos out. That would be nice. And I know we got to work on the Matrix thing. So everybody have a good week. I'll see you for the next live stream. Comment on my videos. Engage. Buy stuff from the store. I'm actually going to create a t-shirt off of something Castle said there. And have a wonderful time. Think carefully, make incremental improvement, and you'll be better, which is all we really care about, right? And actually, that's really important, right? Incremental improvement allows the most important thing to happen because the world needs you to be better. Do it through incremental improvement.